Forest spirits. Donald Carter paused briefly, the biting icy wind slicing sharply through his jacket as he crouched down in the snow-covered landscape, his eyes narrowing intently at the strange footprints pressed into the untouched white surface. The faint, weak light of dawn cast elongated, pale shadows stretching between the silent, towering trees, which seemed to hold their breath in anticipation. His breath fogged the air momentarily before dissipating into the crisp, cool atmosphere, and the only sounds breaking the silence were the subtle creak of shifting snow beneath his boots and the distant rhythmic tapping of a woodpecker echoing through the forest. Carefully, he reached out, brushing aside the layered frost to examine the footprints more closely. They were unlike any he had ever encountered massive paw prints, noticeably deeper than typical deer or fox tracks, yet too small to belong to a bear. The pattern was erratic, uneven, as if the creature had wandered uncertainly, halting frequently. Donald's brow furrowed in concentration. The snow, usually pristine and untouched at this hour, was disturbed by irregular impressions, some overlapping, others leading mysteriously into the shadows of the woods. He realized with growing certainty that this was no natural occurrence. A prickling sensation of unease settled deep in his gut, warning him that something unusual was happening here. The tranquil stillness of the forest had been abruptly interrupted, heightening his senses sharply. These footprints indicated a clear purpose, intentional and almost resembling intelligence. He carefully examined the surroundings, observing the disturbed snow and the faint impressions that hinted at a creature either trying to conceal itself or perhaps issuing a subtle warning. The atmosphere felt heavy, thick with an unspoken sense of danger. He slowly straightened his posture, muscles tensing in readiness, and cautiously took a tentative step forward. The snow beneath his feet crunched audibly, each sound resonating loudly in the quiet of the woods. The trail curved deeper into the forest, winding past dense clusters of pine trees and fallen logs scattered across the ground. Donald hesitated briefly, then continued onward, driven by a mixture of relentless curiosity and instinctive caution. Ignoring the biting wind tugging at his hair and clothes, he kept his focus fixed on the ground beneath him, his senses fully alert to any change. As he moved forward, the trail became increasingly intricate and harder to decipher. A faint scratch mark on the tree trunk drew his immediate attention sharp, unusual, as if something had been forcibly rubbed or clawed against the bark. He slowly extended his hand, fingertips brushing over the coarse, textured surface of the rough bark, detecting a faint tremor of unease within him. The surrounding forest seemed to hold its collective breath, shadows growing longer and more menacing as the weak rays of sunlight struggled to penetrate through the dense canopy overhead. Each snap of a twig underfoot resonated disproportionately loud amidst the silence. Out of nowhere, the trail took a sharp turn toward a small clearing, where the snow was noticeably more disturbed and churned up. Several clumps of soil and broken branches were scattered across the pristine white expanse. Donald crouched down, lowering himself into the snow, carefully scrutinizing the disturbed scene. A dark stain spread across the ground, bright and darkening further in the cold bearing, a striking resemblance to dried blood. His stomach clenched tightly with unease. Could this be evidence of a violent struggle or an altercation? A predator defending its kill, or perhaps something entirely different? He felt a cold shiver crawl painfully up his spine. The heavy burden of responsibility pressed down heavily on his shoulders, weighing him down mentally and emotionally. The surrounding forest seemed to momentarily exhale, settling into an unnatural hushed silence, as if holding its breath in anticipation. His eyes darted around, searching for more clues, any subtle signs or traces of what had recently transpired. The trail abruptly vanished at the edge of the clearing, swallowed completely by the thick, tangled undergrowth, yet the intense tension lodged in his chest refused to fade away. Reaching into his pocket cautiously, Donald pulled out a small, well-worn notebook, flipping it open carefully to record his observations. His fingers, stiff from the cold, trembled slightly as he managed to sketch the footprints, noting their size, shape, and the peculiar, almost uncanny pattern. The strange markings hinted at something unusual, something not entirely animal, yet certainly not fully human, leaving him puzzled and alert. Questions flooded his mind. What kind of creature was this peculiar one? Why was it here in such a remote and desolate place? What secrets was it hiding beneath its silent exterior? A sudden icy gust of wind swept through the trees, carrying an unusual primal scent, metallic, wild, and deeply unsettling. Donald's senses sharpened even more as he took in the strange aroma. His hand instinctively moved toward his rifle, which hung securely from his shoulder. The weight of it offered a reassuring feeling against the potential danger lurking silently in the shadows. Every fiber of his body urged him to retreat quickly, to abandon this mysterious scene behind, but an unexplainable compelling force pushed him to continue forward. Moving carefully and cautiously around the disturbed, uneven snow, his eyes remained fixed on the trail ahead, scanning diligently. The footprints, faint but clearly there, seemed to beckon him like a silent invitation, leading deeper into the very heart of the forest's dense and dark woods. The usual ambient sounds, the rustling of leaves, distant bird calls, had been replaced by an oppressive, unsettling silence, broken only by the faint, almost ghostly scuffing of paws pressing into the snow beneath him. A sudden gust of wind swept through the forest, carrying with it a faint, almost imperceptible whisper of movement. Donald immediately halted, his nerves on high alert. Somewhere in the nearby vicinity, something had shifted or moved subtly, an unseen presence lurking in the shadows, quietly watching and patiently waiting. His heartbeat fluttered faster, yet he deliberately kept a composed exterior, carefully controlling his breathing to stay calm. The woodland around him appeared to be alive, almost possessing a consciousness of its own, as if the ancient trees were subtly whispering secrets and warnings that he couldn't quite hear. He cautiously took a measured step forward, then another, advancing along the trail that curved toward a thick, tangled thicket where the snow had been heavily trampled. Peering into the darkness beneath the tangled branches, he carefully searched for any signs of movement or additional clues that might reveal what was lurking nearby. The silence stretched on relentlessly, heavy and unyielding, filling the air with tension. A faint prickling sensation at the back of his neck signaled that he was being watched, his unseen eyes observing him from the shadows, lurking just beyond his line of sight. His breathing momentarily became uneven, yet he meticulously forced himself to stay calm and composed. The forest's inherent unpredictability had always posed a significant challenge for him, but now it seemed to come alive with an inexplicable energy, something unfamiliar and unsettling. that stirred a deep sense of unease within him. His mind was racing quickly, analyzing every detail. The footprints strangely recent and unusually distinct, the bloodstains scattered across the ground, and the peculiar scent lingering in the air all indicated that something extraordinary had recently transpired. Was it a wild creature, a human being, or perhaps something entirely different? And the persistent questions gnawed at him relentlessly, each one more pressing and urgent than the last, intensifying his sense of mystery. Abruptly, a gentle gust of wind swept through the towering trees, carrying with it a faint, almost imperceptible whisper, an ambiguous message that could be interpreted as either an invitation or a warning. Donald hesitated, caught in a moment of indecision, torn between his natural curiosity and a cautious sense of self-preservation. The dense forest was tightly holding onto its long-held secrets, and he was only beginning to truly understand their profound depth. The narrow, winding trail stretched out before him, inviting him forward with the promise of revealing crucial answers, but simultaneously threatening him with unseen dangers lurking nearby. In that tense moment, a fresh realization suddenly struck him. The subtle clues he had carefully uncovered indicated he was not alone in these woods. Something mysterious or unfamiliar had been here before him, something that had possibly fought fiercely, fled swiftly into the shadows, or silently watched him from the darkness. His sense of complete control and confidence was rapidly slipping away. The trail was more than just animal footprints or natural markings. It was a clear sign of an unknown presence that defied rational explanation. He instinctively tightened his grip on the rifle, his knuckles turning pale from the pressure. His eyes quickly scanned the trail with heightened focus, then darted into the darkness beyond, desperately searching for any sign of movement. The forest around him seemed to pulse with an unspoken ominous warning, as if alive and aware of his presence. Whatever lay hidden ahead was no longer just a matter of simple investigation. Now, it was a matter of life and death, about survival in the face of the unknown danger. As he steadily pressed onward, the path curved into a dense, almost impenetrable thicket where broken branches, scattered leaves, and disturbed patches of snow unmistakably indicated recent activity. Donald moved carefully, every sense heightened and alert to his surroundings. The oppressive silence loomed heavily, interrupted only by the faint rustling of paws in the distance and the irregular crackling of twigs underfoot. He understood he was nearing something crucial, something capable of dramatically altering all his assumptions about this mysterious place. A sudden gust of wind carried a faint metallic odor, a subtle reminder that violence had already left its mark on this scene. Donald's grip on his weapon tightened instinctively. At this point, he was no longer merely tracking footprints. He was unraveling a complex mystery that threatened to shatter his understanding of the woods and himself. He paused briefly, listening intently. The forest around him seemed alive with subtle whispers, unseen eyes observing, deep secrets waiting patiently to be revealed. He took a deep, calming breath, trying to steady his nerves and gather his resolve. Whatever lay ahead in the shadows, he knew he had to confront it head on. The winding path called him onward, leading him deeper into the darkness, where the mysteries and dangers of the unknown patiently awaited his arrival, holding their breath in suspense. Donald suddenly froze in his tracks as a faint rustling noise quietly drifted through the dense trees, the subtle whisper of movement just beyond his line of sight, impossible to pinpoint. The intense midday sun pierced through the thick canopy overhead, casting flickering shadows that danced erratically across the tangled undergrowth below, yet an unshakable cold prickling sensation crept along his skin, sharply heightening his senses and alertness. His eyes darted quickly from side to side, carefully scanning for the source of the noise, his heart pounding steadily in his chest, not out of fear, but driven by the adrenaline coursing through him amidst the overwhelming uncertainty. He cautiously took a tentative step forward, muscles tense and coiled, ears sharply attuned for any further disturbances or sounds. The air around him carried a sharp metallic scent, fresh blood intertwined with the earthy aroma of damp leaves, moss, and decaying wood. This unmistakable smell served as a visceral and haunting reminder that violence had recently unfolded in this very spot. His gaze dropped to the ground where torn grass, snapped twigs, and scattered debris formed a chaotic mosaic of recent activity. The trail had become even more disturbed and aggressive in its pattern, revealing signs of fierce and recent struggle. A few meters further along the trail, broken branches and scattered debris lay haphazardly across the path, creating jagged scars etched into the earth beneath. Donald carefully lowered himself closer, fingertips gently brushing the rough bark of a nearby tree trunk. The fresh scrape was unmistakable reddish streaks, sharply contrasting against the pale smooth surface of the bark, suggesting it was recent, as if someone had desperately clawed at it in either a moment of panic or intense rage. His breath caught slightly at the sight. The evidence unmistakably pointed to a struggle, a frantic effort to escape or defend oneself. He meticulously scanned the surrounding woods again, his senses painfully heightened, acutely attuned to every sound and movement. The dense forest around seemed eerily silent, as if holding its breath, shadows deepening and thickening as the wind stirred the treetops above. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called out, yet its cries sounded hollow and disconnected from the tense, ominous atmosphere building inside him. Every instinct screamed for caution. This was no longer just an ordinary trail, but a violent scene, possibly involving an intelligent and unpredictable opponent. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Something small and quick darted behind a dense, leafy shrub. His body tensed instantly, and his eyes narrowed sharply, alert for any further signs of danger. The thick bushes rustled loudly, yet no figure stepped into view. Instead, a quick fleeting glimpse of white fur or a piece of fabric vanished stealthily into the dense greenery. His mind began to race with thoughts. Was it an innocent animal or something more ominous and threatening? The unsettling idea sent a cold shiver down his spine, making him clutch his chest briefly. He cautiously moved closer, paying close attention to the bloodstains on the soft forest floor. They appeared fresh, still glossy and moist, indicating recent activity. Someone had been here just moments ago, either fighting fiercely or desperately fleeing from danger. The irregular patterns of the blood spatters suggested multiple violent encounters, chaotic, unpredictable, and frantic. His stomach clenched tightly, yet he fought to keep his nerves steady and remain composed. Whoever or whatever caused these injuries was nearby, lurking silently just beyond the edge of his sight, concealing itself in the shadows of the dense woods. A faint, almost imperceptible noise disturbed the silence, an extremely quiet shuffling sound, reminiscent of a heavy breath caught and hidden behind a thick curtain of rustling leaves. Donald held his breath, instinct sharpening as his ears strained to catch any additional sounds. The noise appeared deliberate, slow, as if someone was intentionally trying to hide their presence and remain unseen. Every hair on his body stood on end, sensing that something was amiss. His hand instinctively moved toward his backpack, fingers trembling slightly as he gripped the worn leather strap tightly, seeking some sense of reassurance. He paused briefly, carefully weighing whether he should move forward or cautiously back away. A rising feeling of being watched weighed heavily on him, thickening the tense atmosphere that enveloped the forest. The woods around him seemed to deepen in darkness, shadows stretching out like silent sentinels guarding secrets. Suddenly, the wind shifted direction, bringing with it a faint metallic scent, possibly blood, rust, or something sharply pungent. It was as if the forest itself was warning him to turn back, to abandon his perilous search and retreat from the ominous surroundings. But Donald's determination grew even stronger. Turning away at this point would leave the mystery unresolved, potentially putting others at risk if they came across the same clues later. He moved deliberately, taking a slow, careful step forward, keeping his eyes firmly fixed on the narrow trail ahead as he carefully searched for additional signs. A faint set of footprints had diverted from the main path into a dense thicket, smaller and lighter in size, possibly belonging to someone trying to hide or a small creature scurrying quickly away. The trail was faint yet still distinguishable in the moist, damp earth beneath his feet. The shuffling sounds resumed, now more deliberate and insistent, as if whoever or whatever had made them was trying to conceal or escape. Shadows stretched longer as the woods grew increasingly darker and more oppressive, the towering trees seeming to close ranks around him. His grip on the backpack tightened, knuckles turning white with the tension. Every breath he took was measured and steady, each step carefully calculated and cautious. The sensation of unseen eyes watching him from the shadows grew more intense, prickling along his neck and spine, heightening his awareness of being observed. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught a brief glimpse, a faint glimmer, a quick flash of metallic reflection shimmering among the dense leaves. His whole attention shifted instantly to that tiny movement, and he quickly dropped into a low crouch, reaching out cautiously with tentative fingers to investigate. It was a small tarnished piece of metal, possibly a fragment of a tool or a broken piece of jewelry, partially obscured by dirt and debris, easily overlooked by inattentive or distracted eyes. His fingertips brushed against the cold, rough surface, and a sudden jolt of excitement and curiosity shot through him. This small fragment seemed to be a crucial part of a larger, more complex puzzle. The presence of bloodstains, footprints, and signs of a struggle nearby all suggested that a significant event was taking place, one that was carefully orchestrated, rather than the result of mere chance. In that moment, a sharp, unexpected movement behind him made his heart skip a beat. Instinctively, he spun around, ready to confront whatever had disturbed the quiet. A shadow flickered swiftly and quietly past him, moving with remarkable speed and stealth. His stomach tightened in apprehension, yet he maintained a firm and unwavering stance. Whatever creature or figure it was, it disappeared quickly into the dense trees once more, leaving behind only a faint whisper of its fleeting passage. The woods seemed to constrict further, and the heavy silence was pierced only by the distant, deliberate crack of a thick branch. Under the weight of something unseen, a sound that clearly felt staged, as if someone intentionally alerting their presence without making much noise. His eyes quickly shifted back to the trail again, where he noticed a subtle set of footprints leading deeper into the tangled thicket. The footprints had a different pattern, smaller, lighter, and more cautious in their imprint. Whatever or whoever had been here was clearly trying to hide, to remain unseen and undetected. The trail extended into a more secluded, darker part of the forest, where shadows grew even thicker and the canopy drew the daylight into a gloom. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the trees, carrying a new ominous scent, damp earth mixed with blood and a sharp, metallic tang. It felt like a warning, a glimpse into the danger lurking nearby, indicating that was intruding into a perilous situation. But instead of choosing to retreat, Donald continued onward with determination, driven by a relentless need for answers. Turning back at this point would leave the puzzling mystery unresolved and could potentially allow the unseen threat to remain active and at large. He moved cautiously and deliberately, each step carefully placed, his eyes carefully scanning the ground for any additional clues. A faint trail of footprints veered off the main path, leading deeper into the dense undergrowth. They appeared smaller, lighter, possibly belonging to a person trying to hide their presence or an animal desperately fleeing the scene. The trail was faint yet unmistakable against the muddy soil, clearly indicating recent passage. As he pressed forward, the shuffling sound resumed behind him, more persistent and insistent than before. The woods seemed to darken further, shadows lengthening and gathering like silent witnesses observing his progress. His grip on the backpack tightened, his knuckles going tense with focus and determination. Every one of his senses was on high alert, prepared for whatever might come next. Somewhere in the distance, a sturdy branch suddenly snapped under a heavy weight, sharp and abrupt, piercing the fragile silence of the forest. Donald's heartbeat quickened noticeably as his senses sharpened. Another quick flash of movement appeared, this time further down the winding trail ahead. Whatever it was, either a figure or a creature, seemed to be playing an elusive game of hide and seek among the trees. The uncertainty gnawed relentlessly at him, yet he understood he couldn't afford to hesitate. All the evidence suggested something highly intelligent and dangerous, lurking just beyond his line of sight, silently observing him. A sudden gust of wind shifted, bringing a new, more pungent scent, damp earth, fresh blood, and a chilling metallic tang. It was as if the forest itself was issuing a warning, urging him to turn back and abandon his pursuit. However, Donald's unwavering resolve refused to falter regarding his challenge. Turning away now would mean leaving this mysterious story unfinished, risking even greater danger that could follow. He took a slow, cautious step forward, carefully placing his boots on the uneven ground, his eyes focused intently on the faint trail stretching ahead through the dense forest. The tiny footprints led into a thick tangle of underbrush, smaller and lighter than all the others he had seen before. The pattern indicated that someone or perhaps something was trying to conceal its presence, attempting to slip away unnoticed. Although the trail was faint, it remained legible enough in the soft, muddy earth, marked by subtle impressions. The shuffling sound behind him grew louder and more deliberate, echoing softly within the quiet woods. Shadows stretched long across the forest floor, as if the woods itself were leaning in, watching his every move. His grip on the strap of his backpack tightened instinctively as he moved closer, his senses heightened and nerves on high alert. The prickling sensation on the back of his neck intensified, serving as a visceral reminder that he was no longer alone in this secluded place. Suddenly, a faint glint caught his eye, a tiny metallic fragment among the leaves and debris. Fixating on it intensely, he slowly crouched down, fingertips brushing gently against the cold, hard surface of the metal piece. It was a small, worn, and tarnished fragment, possibly once part of a tool or perhaps a piece of jewelry. It lay partially buried in the dirt, almost completely overlooked by anyone who wasn't paying very close attention. This broken shard, together with the bloodstains smudged nearby and the scattered footprints around, constructed a silent but powerful narrative of violence and secretive concealment. The way the pieces seemed to fit together indicated a struggle that might have been carefully staged or deliberately hidden from plain sight. Donald's thoughts frantic and racing. Who could have been here? Why did a fight erupt here? What were they fleeing from in such haste? Out of nowhere, a sudden movement behind him caused him to spin around quickly. A shadow flickered briefly past him, silent and swift as a whisper in the night. His heart skipped a beat with surprise and alarm, yet kept his stance, determined not to show any weakness. The figure gradually vanished into the thick cluster of trees, leaving behind only a faint whisper of movement softly fading into the wilderness. The surrounding woods grew increasingly darker, with shadows stretching further and the silence deepening into an almost tangible heaviness, almost as if the forest itself was alive with unseen watchful eyes that silently observed. Donald exhaled slowly and deliberately, trying to control the rising wave of unease that threatened to overwhelm him. His thoughts were racing. Was this mysterious presence the work of a human predator, or was it something entirely different and perhaps more sinister? Every clue seemed to point toward a carefully planned act, suggesting that a story was gradually unfolding in the shadows amidst the trees. He came to realize that the trail was not simply a sign of someone fleeing, but appeared to be a deliberate pattern and orchestrated game, designed to lead him deeper into the darkness. He straightened his posture, his eyes scanning the dense undergrowth once more. The bloodstains, torn branches, and footprints continued to call him further into the shadowy depths. The persistent feeling of being watched remained strong, as if the forest held dark secrets that refused to remain hidden. Something waiting just beyond the fragile veil of daylight was aware of his presence and eagerly anticipated what he might do next. With renewed determination, Donald stepped cautiously into the depths of the shadows, fully aware that each deliberate move brought him closer to uncovering the hidden truth and simultaneously placed him in greater danger. The dense woods had transformed into an intricate maze of uncertainty and hidden threats, but was resolutely committed to unraveling its secrets, regardless of the risks involved. Donald's steady breath puffed softly into the cold air as he paused, gripping the coarse, textured bark of a nearby tree, feeling the cool, firm surface beneath his fingertips. The fading remnants of twilight cast elongated, shifting shadows across the uneven forest floor, while a gentle, whispering breeze rustled the leaves overhead and snapped small twigs beneath it. Every nerve in his body was on alert, yet an eerie silence hung heavily in the air, an oppressive quiet that pressed down on him more intensely than the advancing darkness. His gaze flicked rapidly from the faint footprints visible in the snow to the surrounding shadows, meticulously analyzing every subtle movement, every flicker of distant light. He moved with utmost caution, fully aware that the recent disturbance had left behind subtle clues worth scrutinizing carefully. The animal tracks, intertwined with clearly marked human footprints, fresh, unmistakably recent, and oddly juxtaposed, caught his attention. The snow in this part of the woods was patchy, melted by an unseasonal warmth, but the faint impressions pressed into the icy crust betrayed hints of more than mere coincidence. These signs strongly indicated a purposeful presence, perhaps someone intentionally tracking his movements or hiding nearby, watching him from the shadows. A faint flicker of movement briefly caught his sharp eye. Instinctively, he stiffened, muscles tense and coiled in ready alertness. Behind a thick cluster of dense bushes, shadows appeared to ripple subtly, creating a slight disturbance in the otherwise calm and silent forest environment. Donald's gaze sharpened even more as he narrowed his eyes, focusing intensely on that elusive and barely perceptible spot. The surrounding air grew heavier with anticipation, and he pressed his back firmly against the rough-textured tree trunk, ears attentively straining for any faint sound beyond the gentle whisper of the evening wind. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept loudly through the trees, causing dry leaves to flutter down rapidly in a cascading shower. The noise was unexpectedly sharper than usual, each crisp crackle and snap echoed unnaturally in the quiet dusk, amplifying the tension. Donald quickly reached for his flashlight, fumbling with trembling hands as he activated it. The bright beam sliced through the thick gloom with a cold, penetrating glare, sweeping methodically across the dense undergrowth. It revealed a tangle of roots, shifting shadows, and flickering movement, yet nothing appeared out of the ordinary or suspicious. His heartbeat quickened significantly at the moment he sensed a faint, almost imperceptible scrape, a subtle disturbance, reminiscent of a slight shift in the dense underbrush or the faintest, almost inaudible sound of movement nearby. He froze in place, every one of his senses sharply amplified as he listened intently, his ears twitching at the tiniest, almost negligible noise. The bushes around him remained perfectly still, yet an odd prickling sensation began to crawl over his skin, as if invisible eyes were watching him from the lurking darkness. Very slowly, he turned his head, methodically scanning the area once again. The shadows seemed to deepen and stretch unnaturally, wrapping around him like unseen claws intent on enveloping him. His eyes darted over the surrounding trees and undergrowth, meticulously searching for the source of that unsettling, inexplicable feeling. Although nothing appeared to stir or move, the strange sensation persisted stubbornly, growing more persistent and insistent, a clear sign that he was not alone in this silent, suspicious environment. Suddenly, a sharp, tingling prick ran down his spine, resembling a gentle finger brushing across his shoulder. His heart skipped a beat in response, and instinctively, he spun around quickly, swinging his flashlight wildly in search of any movement. But behind him, only empty air and darkness met his tense gaze. The forest appeared to pulse with silent vigilance, as if it were alive with an unseen conscious awareness watching over everything around. A chilling shiver crawled down his spine, prompting him to instinctively tighten his grip on the flashlight, holding it more firmly. His mind sped through various thoughts to interpret this strange, unsettling sensation. Was it merely his imagination or paranoia, or was there truly something present in the shadows? The woods had a notorious reputation for playing tricks on travelers, but this feeling was markedly different, more purposeful, more menacing in its intent. A sudden realization struck him: he was being watched, and the unseen observer was aware of his presence, even that it was nearby. He hesitantly lowered the beam of his flashlight slightly, trying to steady his trembling hands from shaking so much. His eyes diverted downward to focus on the ground where the tracks crisscrossed, some belonging to animals, others to humans, forming a complex and confusing tangle that was hard to decipher. The signs of disturbance, the peculiar footprints, and now this pervasive, unnerving feeling of unseen observation all pointed toward a single undeniable conclusion: someone was lurking nearby, fully aware of his presence. A sudden gust of wind swept past him, causing the trees to sway and their branches to creak ominously under the pressure. The sound was almost like a whisper, an unspoken message carried and amplified by the rustling leaves, adding to the mysterious, intense atmosphere of the woods. Donald's eyes flickered quickly back toward the shadows, scanning desperately for any signs of movement, but he only found endless darkness stretching out before him. The oppressive silence descended once again, heavy and unyielding, as if the very forest was holding its breath in anticipation. He carefully stepped back, muscles tensing in cautious alertness, every fiber of his body on edge. The persistent sensation of being watched lingered, an almost tangible static prickling across his skin and raising goosebumps. His mind spun with questions: was this a warning, a dangerous trap, or merely an illusion playing tricks on his mind? The boundary between reality and hallucination blurred, yet the undeniable feeling of unseen eyes monitoring him remained firmly ingrained. Suddenly, a faint rhythmic tapping sound resonated through the woods, distant yet consistent, like a heartbeat echoing through the night air. Donald's grip on his flashlight tightened instinctively, torn between following that mysterious sound or retreating into the shadows. Before he could make a move, a quick flash of movement appeared behind a nearby tree, a shadow, swiftly darting and vanishing into the darkness, leaving him tense and alert. His stomach clenched sharply at the sudden mysterious appearance. This time, the sensation was no longer vague or ambiguous. It felt undeniably real, tangible, and unmistakable. Something was very close by, quietly observing his surroundings, patiently waiting for the right moment. The unspoken question hovered in his mind: who or what could it be? And why had it chosen this precise moment to reveal itself so subtly, almost covertly? He forced himself to breathe deeply, trying to steady his trembling limbs and calm his racing heart. The forest silence returned once again, thick and absolute, filling the air with a heavy stillness. Yet beneath this calm, the faintest hint of movement persisted, a subtle reminder that the unseen watcher was still nearby, lurking in the shadows behind the trees. Donald understood with a growing sense of certainty that this encounter was only the beginning of a much deeper, more complex mystery. His awareness had shifted. He now realized he was being deliberately stalked, and that the presence was fully aware of his every move. His eyes flicked back to the ground once more, scrutinizing the tangled tracks and disturbed earth around him. The signs clearly pointed to a calculated act. Someone or something had been watching him, perhaps patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike or to reveal itself completely. The metallic tang lingering in the air, subtle yet undeniably persistent, suddenly became clear. It was a faint trace of something completely unfamiliar, an ominous hint of imminent danger. A sudden gust of wind swept through the forest, carrying a faint, cold metallic scent, sharp and piercing, rising ominously from the ground beneath. Donald's senses instantly sharpened as he became acutely aware that the environment was undergoing a subtle but significant transformation. The forest was no longer merely a silent witness, but an active participant in this tense situation. He realized that the signs around him weren't random anomalies. They appeared to be messages, warnings, or perhaps even invitations. Carefully, he stepped away from the tree and moved cautiously toward the darker, more concealed shadows, intent on locating the source of the metallic smell. His eyes caught a faint glint among the roots, something discarded, maybe a small piece of metal or a fragment of some equipment. As he drew nearer, he noticed fresh footprints leading away from the tracks, heading deeper into the dense woods. Someone had recently passed through this area, intentionally trying to cover their trail or lure him into a trap. Suddenly, a noise behind him, a low, deliberate crack, made him spin around instinctively, his heart pounding in his chest. His flashlight cast no light beyond the endless darkness, yet the feeling of being watched grew even stronger and more intense. The metallic scent in the air became more pungent, along with the unsettling sensation that he was being gradually pulled into a web of unseen looming danger. He quickly realized that his initial suspicion of just an ordinary observer had shifted. This was no random threat or coincidence. Someone had been secretly tracking his every move, possibly lying in wait for him to come closer or to make a careless mistake. The subtle signs clearly pointed to an intelligent and calculating adversary, someone who understood the terrain intricacies, the smallest signs, and monitored his movements carefully. His thoughts raced as he tried to weigh his options carefully. Retreating now could mean losing the trail entirely, making it impossible to track him further, but rushing forward blindly could also lead him into a deadly trap. He knew he had to find the source, either to confront it directly or to outwit and outmaneuver his hidden opponent. His grip on the flashlight tightened as he deliberately took a slow, cautious step toward the deeper, more shadowed areas, his eyes scanning every movement for signs of life. Suddenly, an eerie, faint, rhythmic tapping echoed again, this time, much closer than before. It was not just random static noise, but a purposeful, almost like an intentional signal. Donald's instincts strongly indicated that whatever was observing him was attempting to communicate or attract his attention. He paused briefly, carefully weighing his options, fully aware that each passing second was critical. Then, emerging quietly from behind a thick, sturdy tree trunk, a figure materialized, silent, completely motionless. Its form remained partially obscured, yet the undeniable presence was evident. Donald froze in place, recognizing that the situation had escalated into a new, more perilous phase. The figure made no move to attack, but instead simply kept watch, its intentions impossible to decipher. The metallic aroma in the air grew intensely strong, and Donald realized that this encounter was no longer about mere suspicion or curiosity. It had become a matter of life or death. With a deep, steadying breath, he raised his flashlight, directing the beam squarely at the mysterious figure. The bright light revealed a fleeting glimpse of a face pale, featureless, with eyes shimmering with an unreadable cryptic purpose. The figure remained completely silent, motionless, yet its unwavering, quiet vigil silently communicated a powerful message. The game had begun, and the forest's long-held secrets were on the verge of being revealed. Donald's perception had gradually shifted from cautious exploration to an intense confrontation with something far more deliberate, threatening, and perilous. He gently lowered his flashlight a little more, his eyes fixed steadily on the figure, fully aware that his understanding of the situation was now altered in an irreversible way. Whatever lay in store ahead, he was no longer merely an observer, he had become an active participant in a silent, deadly pursuit that could change everything. The shadows surrounding him seemed to throb with suppressed anticipation, and Donald realized that this was only just the outset of a deeper and more unsettling mystery, one that would challenge all his previous assumptions about the woods, himself, and the unseen lurking forces hidden within the darkness. Donald's breath fogged in the frigid, icy air as he paused on the narrow trail, the soft crunch of snow muffling his steps beneath his boots. The darkness pressed in tightly from all directions, broken only by the faint flickering glow of distant stars overhead. The forest around him was disturbingly silent, save for the barely audible whisper of wind slipping through the trees. Every instinct within him urged him to stay vigilant and alert, yet a growing sensation of unease gnawed persistently at his confidence and composure. He carefully examined the footprints ahead, their edges blurred by fresh, untouched snow, yet still faintly recognizable as signs of recent passage. Moments earlier, the trail had been clearly visible and easy to follow. Now, it appeared to dissolve entirely into the inky blackness, swallowed by the deep shadows that cloaked the forest. His fingers clenched around the handle of his flashlight more tightly as he paused, hesitating in the tense silence. The beam flickered uncertainly before he finally clicked it on, piercing the oppressive darkness with a cold, piercing, and sharply focused glow. The footprints and tracks led into the thick undergrowth, then suddenly disappeared without a trace. There was no sign of disturbance, no broken twigs, no displaced snow, no indication of recent activity, just an eerie emptiness. Donald's eyes darted quickly around the area, sweeping across the surrounding trees and dense bushes, desperately searching for any movement or clues of recent presence. The overwhelming silence pressed heavily on him, broken only by the faint settling of snow and the rhythm of his shallow, uneven breathing. Out of the corner of his eye, a faint flicker of movement caught his attention, a subtle shadow shifting just behind a nearby bush. His body instinctively tensed up. He froze in place, narrowing his eyes in suspicion. The shadow darted away suddenly before he could get a good look or identify what it was, dissolving into the darkness like a fleeting, ghostly apparition. His firm grip on the flashlight tightened even further as he instinctively lifted it higher, scanning the dark surroundings carefully. The powerful beam cut through the dense branches, exposing only the quiet frost-laden landscape stretching out before him. Cautiously, he took a measured step forward, each movement slow and deliberate to avoid making unnecessary noise. The snow beneath his sturdy boots cracked softly with each step, subtly revealing his presence to the silent woods. He crouched down smoothly, brushing aside a thin layer of snow with steady hands to examine the ground more closely and attentively. The disturbed snow in this spot was uneven and irregular, forming patterns that hinted at recent movement. Perhaps someone or something had paused briefly or passed through this area. However, there were no footprints to be found. The trail had completely disappeared, leaving no trace behind. A sudden gust of wind swept past, causing a shiver to crawl up his spine, making him tense. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself, feeling the heavy weight of the night pressing down and enveloping him. Every sense was heightened and alert, but the forest offered no tangible answers, only a suffocating silence and the unspoken, lingering secrets hidden within the darkness. He looked around once more, meticulously searching for any possible clues. The snow was largely untouched and spotless, except for a faint, barely noticeable smear, a dark streak that appeared strangely out of place and unnatural against the pristine white. He leaned in closer, narrowing his eyes to get a better look. The smear was subtle, almost smeared into the snow itself, but it subtly suggested that a struggle had taken place nearby. This struggle had left no footprints behind, only an irregular, blurred blotch of blood or dirt. His heart rate increased slightly. All the signs pointed to recent violence or confrontation. He scrutinized the surrounding area more carefully, observing a faint, uneven pattern in the snow, like something had been dragged or pushed through the snow. As he studied it more intently, he noticed a thin, dark stain, a faint smear of drying blood that was beginning to evaporate into the cold, crisp air. The discovery sent a tense ripple through him. The trail was completely gone here, replaced by this ominous, unsettling sign of what had transpired. Whatever had triggered this unsettling disturbance remained close by, possibly observing him covertly. His thoughts scrambled to assemble the clues about what exactly had transpired. Was it an animal, a person, or something altogether unfamiliar and unknown? The unsettling idea made his stomach tighten with anxiety. The dangers lurking within the forest exceeded his initial expectations, and each step further into the dark shadows amplified his alertness. A distant sharp crack suddenly sliced through the silence with startling clarity. His entire body tensed instantly in response. He quickly spun around, shining his flashlight meticulously across the surrounding trees and foliage. But there was nothing there, only the gentle whisper of the wind and the slow creak of swaying branches. He held his breath carefully, trying to remain completely still and silent while listening intently for any sounds. Suddenly, a faint rustling noise emerged from behind him, similar to a branch, snapping under a heavy weight, causing him to quickly whirl around in alarm. His flashlight beam flickered erratically, illuminating only the surrounding darkness and casting long shadows. He saw nothing but the silent, dense woods stretching out infinitely around him. The noise had been just a false alarm, he reassured himself, yet an unsettling, prickling sensation of being watched continued to linger on his skin. Moving cautiously, he stepped slowly toward the spot where the trail had abruptly disappeared into the woods. Each deliberate step was carefully placed, and his ears remained alert for any further sounds. The snow crunching beneath his feet was loud in the oppressive silence of the forest. He paused momentarily, listening intently, but only complete silence responded. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of a faint shimmer, almost imperceptible, shimmering mysteriously between the trees, catching the faintest glint of light. It was too subtle to be absolutely certain, but enough to ignite a strong suspicion in his mind. His heart pounded intensely as he cautiously approached the mysterious scene, feeling both wary and irresistibly compelled to investigate further. Near the faint shimmer, he discovered a small area of disturbed snow, more than just a simple footprint, but a deliberate disturbance indicating something unusual had taken place. As he carefully crouched down, trembling fingers gently brushed aside the snow, uncovering a narrow smear of dark, viscous liquid, possibly blood, slowly evaporating into the chilly, frosty air. This sign was impossible to ignore. Clearly, something had been dragged, carried, or moved through this spot. The sudden realization sharpened his senses, making him hyper-aware. The trail itself might have been erased or obscured, but this ominous clue stood out starkly against the snow. His mind raced with numerous possibilities: predator, prey, or perhaps something entirely unknown and unpredictable. The more clues he uncovered, the less confident he felt about understanding what had transpired. He slowly rose to his feet, eyes darting nervously across the surrounding darkness, trying to make sense of the unsettling scene. Shadows pressed closer and more insistently, eagerly attempting to conceal whatever mysterious figure or entity lurked just beyond sight. A creeping, uneasy awareness gradually settled over him. The ominous presence was still nearby, silently watching and patiently waiting for the right moment. The forest had seemingly transformed into a living, breathing entity, expertly hiding its deepest secrets behind a thick veil of silence and darkness. Suddenly, a faint, almost imperceptible noise like a branch cracking softly under weight made him instinctively spin around again in alarm. His flashlight flickered unexpectedly, causing the beam to dart wildly in multiple directions. For a tense moment, he saw only impenetrable darkness stretching around him. Then, at the very edge of his peripheral vision, a subtle silhouette appeared, just enough to send a shiver and a jolt of adrenaline through his entire body. He carefully steadied his breath, trying to keep his heart pounding silently within his chest. The woods seemed to shift and change. The familiar trail was gone, replaced by an unnerving aura of unseen menace and lurking danger. Whatever had been hiding in the shadows had successfully erased all evidence, leaving him stranded at the edge of understanding, uncertain of what was truly out there. He took a deep, steadying breath, battling the overwhelming wave of doubt that threatened to paralyze him. The dense silence of the forest weighed heavily on his mind, yet compelled himself to continue moving forward despite the uncertainty. With each cautious step, he kept his ears finely tuned, listening intently for any faint sound that might indicate movement or danger nearby. The snow beneath his boots crunched loudly in the stillness, breaking the quiet and echoing through the trees. He paused once more, holding his breath as he listened carefully, but only the persistent silence remained, offering no clues. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a subtle gleam, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker between the trees, barely distinguishable from the shadows. Although it was too slight to be certain, it was enough to spark suspicion and alertness. His heartbeat quickened, and he slowly advanced toward the glint, feeling a mix of wariness and determination. As he approached, he observed a small, irregular patch of disturbed snow more than just a simple footprint. It appeared as if something had been dragged across or pushed aside, hinting at recent activity in the area. He crouched down carefully, trembling with nervous anticipation, and gently brushed away the accumulated snow from the ground. Just beneath the surface, a faint smear of dark liquid, was it blood, began to slowly evaporate into the cold, crisp air around him. The unsettling discovery intensified his sense of dread and unease. The trail had been intentionally and meticulously erased here, replaced by this sinister, ominous sign. His mind quickly filled with a flurry of urgent questions. What could have caused this mysterious stain? Why was the trail here completely gone without a trace? Was it driven by fear, caution, or some other unknown factor that kept him rooted to the spot? He then straightened his stance gradually, his eyes narrowing as they scanned the shadows and flickering shapes around him. The darkness seemed to press inward, almost eager to conceal whatever danger or secret lurked just beyond his line of sight. A chilling realization suddenly struck him. Whatever had caused this strange disturbance was still lurking nearby, watching his every move, patiently waiting for the right moment. A faint rustling sound came from behind him, just a subtle shift in the underbrush that caused him to spin around quickly. His flashlight flickered unexpectedly, its beam flickering erratically and darting in unpredictable directions. In the darkness surrounding him, only shadows and emptiness responded. Then, at the very edge of his peripheral vision, a faint silhouette materialized, just enough to make his pulse race faster with anticipation. He carefully steadied his uneven breathing, his heart pounding loudly in the quiet night. The forest around him had transformed. The familiar trail he was following had vanished entirely, replaced by an overwhelming sense of unseen lurking danger. Whatever was hiding within the shadows had successfully erased any trace of evidence, leaving him stranded and confused at the very brink of understanding what was truly happening. Donald's mind became more alert and focused. The mystery had grown far more complex and unsettling than he initially believed, deepening with each passing moment. The forest was unwilling to give up its hidden secrets easily or without a challenge. The erased trail was no mere accident, it served as a cryptic message, a warning sign, or perhaps a deliberate test of his resolve. Regardless of what the truth truly was, it remained just beyond his grasp, concealed within the shadows that now completely enveloped him, silent and patient as ever. Donald hesitated on the snow-covered path, his breath briefly materializing into delicate clouds in the chilly fading twilight. Shadows stretched and intertwined across the forest floor as the last remnants of light weakly pierced through the sparse, twisted canopy above. His gaze was fixed intently on the faint outline of fresh footprints, more substantial and purposefully placed than anything he had seen so far. The snow around these marks was disturbed chaotically, torn up as if a colossal creature had recently moved through this area. He lowered himself to the ground, gently clearing a thin layer of frost to better examine the footprints, observing them with meticulous focus. The tracks led toward a rugged outcrop of jagged rocks and elevated vantage point that overlooked the surrounding maze of trees. His heart rate quickened, not due to physical exertion, but because of a growing sense of curiosity mixed with cautious wariness about what might lie ahead. These were not typical animal footprints. The distinct claws, the precise spacing, and the deliberate pattern all hinted at something with intelligence and purpose behind them. It was clear this wasn't just the track of a wandering predator, but rather that of a creature with intent, one that knew exactly where it was heading. A faint earthy musk lingered on the cold air, richly musky, primal in scent, with a wildness that sent a chill down his spine. Donald's senses immediately heightened as he carefully examined the snow, noticing faint gouges along the edges of the track's claw marks, perhaps, or the sharp nails digging into the frozen ground. The impressions appeared quite recent. He estimated they'd been made no more than an hour ago, judging by the crispness and clarity of the prints. Who or what had left them? This thought caused a shiver to run down his back. Suddenly, a subtle change in the atmosphere made the hairs on his body stand on end. The dense forest around him seemed to hold its breath in anticipation as a sense of unease crept over the area. Shadows flickered subtly at the very edge of his peripheral vision, resembling fleeting whispers carried by the night breeze. Donald froze instantly, his eyes darting anxiously toward the darkness, desperately trying to detect any movement amid the oppressive silence that seemed to settle around him. Then, just beyond a small cluster of ancient trees, he caught a brief glimpse, a quick flash of dark fur, merging seamlessly into the shadows. A fleeting, elusive shadow, yet enough to tighten his stomach with a sense of deep unease. He clenched his flashlight more tightly in his grip, the trembling in his hand gradually stabilizing as he directed the beam into the darkness. It pierced through the gloom, casting light on patches of untouched snow and tangled underbrush that seemed to hide secrets. A faint scrape echoed behind him, a branch snapping or perhaps a careful step on frozen twigs. Donald instinctively spun around, sweeping the light across the treetops and undergrowth, his ears straining for any sound or sign of movement. Only the gentle whisper of the wind and the distant creak of swaying branches responded to his urgency. Proceeding with caution, he edged closer to the rocky outcrop, every sense alert. The jagged, weathered rocks provided an elevated vantage point that might reveal additional details about what was lurking nearby or hiding just out of sight. As he steadily approached the rocky outcrop, he noticed something unusual: scattered tufts of animal fur, caught in the sparse, leafless branches above, tiny clumps clinging tightly to the rough bark. The snow directly beneath the rocks was speckled with dark, fresh blood stains, strikingly vivid against the pure white surroundings. It was clear evidence of recent violence or a fierce struggle, he realized, not far from his current position. His gaze drifted down to the ground where a faint trail of torn grass blades, scattered twigs, and small broken branches wound its way toward the rocky ledge. The tracks continued onward up the gentle slope, heading toward the forest crest. Donald hesitated briefly, carefully weighing his options: either remain hidden and observe quietly or follow the trail into the unknown depths. The latter option called to him intensely an opportunity to uncover the truth behind what was truly unfolding in this secluded part of the forest. He decided to follow the tracks, each step taken with precision and care, to avoid disturbing the fragile snow and revealing his position. The cold penetrated deeply through his gloves, sharply biting into his skin, as the icy air pressed relentlessly against his face and chilled him to the bone. The trail became increasingly irregular and unpredictable, displaying signs of a much larger creature passing through scuffed bark on nearby trees. Fresh scratches that seemed deliberate and purposeful, as if marking territory or warning others to stay away. His heartbeat quickened noticeably, the feeling of being watched growing stronger and more oppressive. Suddenly, a faint rustling broke through the haunting silence of the forest. Donald froze instantly, his heart pounding loudly in his ears. He slowly turned, shining his powerful flashlight toward the source of the noise. A shadow darted swiftly behind a thick trunk, a sudden dark movement that disappeared before he could get a clear view. His breath hitched involuntarily, instinctively tightening his grip on the flashlight's handle. Could it be the same creature that had earlier left the mysterious footprints? Or was it something entirely different lurking in the darkness? He pushed onward thoughtfully, his eyes rapidly scanning the surrounding environment. The trail curved upward, twisting toward a small narrow cleft nestled between jagged rocks. As he continued climbing, he noticed more signs, deep claw marks etched into the bark of a fallen broken tree, and fresh blood stains smeared across the uneven rocky surfaces. The unmistakable aroma of damp soil combined with a more primal animalistic scent grew increasingly intense and pungent. Reaching the base of the rocky outcrop, Donald hesitated briefly, carefully peering into the darkness cast by the overhanging rocks above. The oppressive silence weighed heavily on him, broken only by the distant mournful howl of a lone wolf, a long haunting cry reverberating through the rustling trees. His grip tightened around the flashlight, a natural instinct warning him to stay extremely alert. Suddenly, a faint movement flickered at the edge of his peripheral vision. His heart pounding faster, he spun around sharply. There, just beyond a cluster of thick bushes, a shadowy figure hunched silently, remaining motionless. He aimed the flashlight beam carefully, but the mysterious figure abruptly slipped away into the darkness, vanishing behind a large boulder. His stomach sank with unease. Was this the same creature that had left the peculiar tracks earlier? Or was it something entirely different and unknown? He hesitated momentarily, then cautiously moved closer to the rocky ledge's edge, trying to get a better view. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying with it a strange, almost hypnotic scent, something ancient, primal, and deeply unsettling. It almost felt as if the forest itself was trying to communicate with him, attempting to draw him further into its hidden mysteries. The footprints, the bloodstains, the fleeting glimpses all seemed to come together like a cryptic message, a warning, or perhaps an invitation. Why would these elusive beings, whatever they truly were, lead him here? What purpose could this mysterious place possibly serve? Donald's mind raced quickly, desperately trying to piece together the fragments of clues he had gathered. The sense of imminent danger heightened significantly, yet his determination only grew stronger. He knew he had to uncover and reveal the hidden truth, regardless of how disturbing or unsettling it might be. As he carefully prepared himself to descend further into the darkness, a low, threatening growl echoed from behind the cluster of rocks, a muffled but unmistakable sign of something lurking nearby. Donald froze in place once more, his eyes piercing through the shadows, as he instinctively scanned the darkness around him. It was clear that something was watching him intently, patiently waiting for the next move. The shadows around him seemed to pulse with a strange, almost living energy, inviting him closer or possibly warning him to turn back. But in that moment, he understood clearly this encounter marked only the very beginning of what awaited him. He took a deep, steadying breath, trying to ground himself amidst the rising tension. The trail of clues and mysteries called out to him, urging him onward into the unknown that lay ahead. The forest itself was speaking in faint whispers, revealing its secrets to those willing to listen, and he was profoundly determined to interpret its messages and uncover the truths hidden within. Suddenly, a faint shimmering glow appeared briefly at the very edge of his peripheral vision, catching his attention unexpectedly. Donald quickly spun around, his heart pounding with renewed urgency and fear. Just a few steps beyond a dense thicket of bushes, something dark and hunched over moved stealthily, silent, unmoving, and almost ghostly in the dim light. He raised his flashlight cautiously, aiming it toward the shadowy figure, but it swiftly slipped away into the surrounding darkness, disappearing behind a large boulder once again. He hesitated for a moment, then slowly edged closer toward the edge of the ledge's rim, feeling a mix of curiosity and unease. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying with it a strange, almost hypnotic scent, something ancient, earthy, and primal, as if calling out to the very essence of the forest itself. The footprints in the moist soil, the bloodstains smeared across the ground, and the fleeting glimpses of movement all seemed to convey a message, a warning, or perhaps an unspoken calling from the wilderness. His mind swirled with questions. Why would these mysterious creatures, whatever they might be, draw him to this secluded place? What secret or hidden truth did this mysterious location hold within its shadows? The realization gradually sank in that the trail was far more than a simple footpath. It was a profound summons that demanded attention, a call to action. He hesitated briefly before turning to descend, but suddenly a deep guttural growl echoed through the woods, freezing him solid in place. The shadows lurking behind the jagged rocks pulsed with an almost palpable life, as if they were waiting and alive, alert for something. The forest itself had spoken its language, primal, unrefined, and raw, and now Donald understood. Faced a crucial decision: should he retreat quickly or stand his ground and confront whatever danger was hiding in the darkness. Taking a steadying breath to calm himself, he made the conscious choice to press forward, resolute in his mission to uncover the mystery lurking ahead. The trail gently beckoned him onward, promising secrets buried within the forest depths, and he was determined to follow it into the unknown. The oppressive silence stretched out, heavy with anticipation, while the shadows continued to shift as darkness deepened around him. Donald's breath condensed visibly in the cold, biting night air as he paused atop a jagged outcrop, his eyes piercing through the gloom below. The pale glow of the moon reflected off the snow-covered ground, casting flickering shadows that danced erratically across the uneven terrain, adding an eerie aura to the scene. His fingers involuntarily clenched tighter, not just from the biting cold, but also due to an overwhelming sense of foreboding that constricted around his chest, making it harder to breathe. The hours since he had arrived in this eerily silent place had unraveled more questions than he could count, each new clue deepening his suspicion that he was not alone anymore. Suddenly, a gust of chilling wind swept through, carrying a faint but piercing metallic scent smoke. Not the warm, inviting aroma of a campfire, but something sharply acrid, almost unnatural in its intensity. Donald inhaled sharply, flaring his nostrils as he desperately tried to decipher it. The metallic tang was mixed with the smell of burnt wood and ash, suggesting recent deliberate burning of materials to hide evidence. His stomach clenched tightly, clearly. Someone had been here very recently, and their intent was unmistakable in effort to conceal their presence. He sank down onto his knees on the cold, icy stone, fingertips pressing into the freezing surface beneath him. Carefully inspecting the ground, he noticed fresh footprints, likely less than an hour old, that had veered off from the main trail onto a narrower, less frequented path that disappeared into the dark woods ahead. The uneven, hurried, and inconsistent tracks appeared as if they had been hastily made in order to avoid detection or leave minimal evidence behind. Clearly human, yet showing unmistakable signs of nervousness, perhaps someone fleeing from danger or intentionally trying to obscure their trail with frantic movements. Donald's eyes narrowed sharply as he carefully examined the footprints. Each step was muffled by the thick layer of snow, making them difficult to spot at first glance. The tracks twisted through sparse bushes and traced along the edge of the cliff, ultimately leading toward a small cluster of gnarled, twisted trees that looked ancient and weathered. Near one of these trees, Donald spotted a fresh scratch gouged into the bark, a jagged scar that looked intentionally made with purpose. The bark was torn deep and uneven, resembling either a warning or a cryptic message left behind by someone with a specific intent. His pulse quickened with a mix of anticipation and caution. He reached out slowly, fingertips gently brushing against the scarred surface of the tree. The deliberate marking clearly suggested some form of sign, possibly a warning meant for others, or a coded message directed at someone specific, adding a new layer to the mystery he was unraveling. His mind hurriedly raced to piece together all the clues and connections. Who could possibly be arriving here at this late hour, and what exactly was their intended purpose? A faint, almost imperceptible rustling sound broke through the heavy silence, distant yet unmistakably present, sending a shiver down his spine. Donald instantly froze in place, muscles tensing in anticipation. His senses sharpened sharply, every nerve heightened and alert for any sign of danger. He thought he briefly caught a whisper of movement behind him, but as he spun around swiftly, only shadows flickered eerily in the darkness, creating an illusion of motion. His flashlight beam pierced the gloom, illuminating nothing but empty space and dense shadows. He gradually lowered the light, straining his ears to listen more intently, his heart pounding loudly in his chest. The surrounding forest seemed to hold its breath once again, save for the occasional gust of wind that rattled the sparse, withered branches overhead. He cast his gaze downward, carefully observing a faint disturbance in the snow, an irregular trail of displaced flakes that stretched away from the footprints. It appeared as if someone had attempted to wipe away their tracks, but inadvertently left behind subtle signs of haste or nervousness, revealing their unease. Kneeling down, Donald gently brushed aside the snow with his gloved fingers to get a closer look. The ground beneath was damp, sticky, and icy to the touch, adding to the sense of cold and suspense. Suddenly, a swift movement darted behind a nearby bush, a shadow, slipping quickly out of his line of sight. Instinctively, he directed his flashlight toward the area of movement. The bright beam briefly caught a quick glimpse of dark fur, ears flicking sharply, before vanishing into the dense undergrowth. A prickling sensation crept up his spine, signaling alertness. This was no ordinary animal trail. It told a deeper story. Someone had been here, someone familiar with the forest, someone who deliberately left signs behind, revealing their presence and intent. Someone is observing him at this very moment. He slowly rose to his feet, trying to steady his rapid breathing after the exertion. His eyes carefully scanned the surrounding area, meticulously searching for additional clues or signs. The distinctive scent of smoke grew increasingly stronger in the air, and he noticed a faint flickering glow some distance away, most likely from a campfire or an unattended lantern. This meant that people, or at least a single individual, were nearby and possibly watching him. His mind was racing with thoughts and hypotheses. The footprints in the dirt, the scratch mark on the tree, and the fleeting movement he caught out of the corner of his eye all indicated a deliberate effort to either hide themselves or mislead anyone. Was this the same person who left the initial signs and evidence, or was it another observer entirely? Deciding to move forward with extreme caution, Donald slowly advanced along the trail, each step carefully measured, deliberate, and as silent as possible. His gaze shifted repeatedly between the uneven ground beneath his feet and the dim, ominous darkness stretching ahead into the night. The faint glow in the distance seemed to call him forward, alluring yet slightly intimidating, as doubt and cautious hesitation rooted him to his position. Trusting his instincts above all else, he made the deliberate decision to move forward quietly, stealthily taking cover behind a cluster of thick trees to minimize his chances of being spotted. As he cautiously approached the source of the light, he caught sight of a small campfire flickering among scattered rocks, its flames casting dancing shadows that flickered ominously around it. Nearby, a lone figure hunched over a cooking pot, tending to whatever was simmering inside with slow, deliberate movements. The silhouette was engulfed in darkness, yet his careful, measured actions revealed a clearly human presence. Donald's fingers tightened around his flashlight's handle, gripping it with both anticipation and nervousness. He paused briefly, weighing the risks confronting the figure could be extremely dangerous, but remaining hidden offered the possibility to gather critical intelligence without revealing himself. He kept his position concealed behind the trees, watching closely and intently. Without warning, the figure suddenly looked up, eyes glinting faintly in the firelight, piercing through the darkness and making Donald's pulse quicken. Their eyes briefly locked in Donald's through the darkness, conveying a silent communication that needed no words. No verbal exchange took place, yet an unspoken understanding flowed between them, whether it was a warning, an alert, or perhaps an invitation to proceed. The wind shifted once more, bringing with it more smoke that curled into the night air, along with a faint lingering scent of ash and burning matter. Donald's skin prickled anew, as if unseen, watchful eyes were silently assessing him. The feeling of being watched intensified, causing him to question everything he believed about this mysterious place and its seemingly secretive inhabitants. He faced a critical decision to stay hidden and observe the situation further, risking that he might be discovered, or to step into the open and face the potential for confrontation. His mind replayed the subtle clues, the footprints in the snow, the scratch marks, the fleeting movement in the shadows, and he realized that someone had intentionally left a trail. It could be meant to lure him closer or to test his patience and determination. Carefully and deliberately, Donald took a slow step forward, moving cautiously through the snow-covered ground, each of his steps muffled by the icy crust beneath. As he drew nearer to the flickering fire, the figure suddenly stirred again, reaching into a satchel beside them. Donald's eyes widened slightly in surprise. What secrets was this person hiding from view? Was this individual a friend or a foe? And more importantly, what was their true purpose here in this enigmatic place? The fire's glow grew even more intense, flickering wildly and casting dancing shadows across the eerie scene. Donald's heartbeat quickened with a mixture of anticipation and unease, sensing that the upcoming moments would irrevocably change his understanding of everything around him. Shadows stretched long and ominous, creeping across the forest as if holding its breath in anticipation. A subtle but perceptible shift in the surrounding atmosphere signaled that the crucial moment of truth was approaching rapidly. The trail, the various signs, the silent figure, each fragment forming an intricate mosaic of uncertainty and hidden motives. Someone else was definitely present nearby, and their intentions might be darker and more dangerous than he dared to imagine. He paused briefly, carefully weighing his options and deciding his next move with cautious deliberation. His instincts urged him to proceed with caution, yet a compelling sense of curiosity relentlessly pushed him forward despite the risks. The profound silence of the night grew heavier, imbued with secrets and underlying threats lurking in the darkness. As the dying embers of the fire flickered one final time, Donald suddenly realized that the shadows around him were slowly closing in, and he was no longer alone in this secluded place. Donald's gaze fixed intently on the distant horizon, where the faint pale streaks of dawn's early light began to break through the sparse bare canopy of trees. The biting cold that had chilled him earlier had eased slightly, but a persistent shiver still ran through his limbs, intensified by the heavy silence that enveloped the forest in an almost oppressive quiet. The snow now under his boots was marked with dark patches of frozen blood that pulsed faintly beneath the surface, whispering faintly of recent violence and unrest just beyond his sight. His eyes darted nervously from shadow to shadow, each movement heightened by suspicion and caution. Something unseen was out there, silently watching him. A faint rustling sound suddenly broke the stillness, a subtle shift among the tangled branches overhead. Donald instantly froze, his instinct sharpening sharply in response to the mysterious movement. His hand instinctively hovered near his waist, fingers gently brushing the cold hard metal of his knife. Carefully, he slowly lowered himself into a crouching position, his voice barely above a whisper, filled with cautious suspicion. "Who's there?" he asked softly, almost trembling. Silence responded to him, interrupted only by the faint whisper of wind threading silently through the bare branches of the trees. He narrowed his eyes, focusing intently as he scanned the surrounding dense thicket. Then, suddenly, a flicker, a brief movement, faint and quick, pressed low among the bushes, almost perfectly blending into the surrounding greenery. The figure was hunched over, trembling noticeably, as if desperately trying to hide or slip away unnoticed. Donald's heartbeat quickened, but he proceeded with deliberate caution, every step carefully measured and controlled. As he moved forward, the earthy scent of damp soil mixed with dried grass filled his nostrils, layered with something sharper metallic and unmistakably reminiscent of blood. His gaze was drawn to a splash of crimson on the snow, leading toward a tangled mess of broken branches and crushed foliage, hinting at recent violence or danger. He cautiously moved closer, his knees softly sinking into the thick blanket of snow beneath him, carefully conscious of not disturbing the fragile, oppressive silence that enveloped the area. Without warning, a faint, muffled gasp escaped the lips of the injured figure, drawing Donald's gaze. His eyes widened just a little more as he took in the scene before him. The man was slumped against a dense thicket of branches and bushes, blood steadily oozing from a deep, jagged cut across his side, staining the snow around him. His pale, exhausted face was streaked with dirt and beads of sweat, eyes fluttering weakly as he fought desperately against slipping into unconsciousness. Each ragged, labored breath caused his chest to heave noticeably, instinctively igniting Donald's protective instincts and concern. "Take it easy," Donald softly whispered as he carefully knelt down beside him, trying to sound reassuring. "You're injured. I'm here to help you now and get you some aid." The man's eyes flickered with a tense mixture of fear and faint relief, searching Donald's face for reassurance. His lips parted slightly, but no sound escaped from them. After a tense moment of silence, he finally managed to rasp out, "There, after me. I can't. Let them catch me," his voice trembling with fear. Donald's brow furrowed deeply as he listened. "Who's after you? What exactly happened?" he asked urgently. The man's eyes flickered around anxiously, as if he expected enemies to suddenly emerge from the surrounding shadows. His trembling hand darted into his coat pocket and grabbed something tightly, holding onto it as if his life depended on it. Donald instinctively moved closer, keeping his gaze fixed intently on his every movement. A crumpled piece of paper appeared briefly in his grip, clenched desperately as though it was a vital lifeline. Carefully, Donald reached out and took the paper, unfolding it gently with precise fingers. Despite being stained and frayed at the edges, the hurried handwriting was still legible. "They're watching. We're all in danger. Trust no one. Seek out the evidence needed to uncover the truth." A cold shiver ran down Donald's spine as he absorbed the ominous message. It made clear that this was not an ordinary attack, but part of something far more sinister and carefully planned. The man's trembling hand clenched Donald's sleeve tightly, his grip desperate and trembling with urgency. "Help me," he muttered in a cracked, trembling voice. "They'll kill me if I stay here. You're the only one who can stop this horror from escalating." Donald paused, torn between exercising caution and showing compassion. The man's face was battered, his eyes filled with raw, genuine fear, imploring for help in this moment of extreme danger. His torn clothing was ragged and tattered, dirt was smeared messily across his face, and blood stains marred his shirt, indicating a recent violent struggle. The look of pure desperation was painfully evident on his features, revealing the severity of his situation. "Who's chasing you?" Donald asked quietly, his voice soft but urgent. "And what exactly is this evidence you're talking about?" The man's lips quivered uncontrollably before he finally managed to speak, trembling from fear. "Corruption. In the town, I stumbled upon something huge, a secret they desperately want to keep hidden from everyone. That's the reason they're relentlessly hunting me. I saw too much, and now my life is in danger." Donald's jaw tightened in response, clenched with determination and concern. The words confirmed his deepest suspicions that this was no ordinary common forest mystery. Someone within the town was deeply entangled in something dark, mysterious, and dangerous enough to cause a man to flee into these shadowy woods for safety. He carefully looked around, thoroughly assessing the thick surroundings for any signs of pursuit or hidden danger. No distant sounds of footsteps or voices could be heard, only the heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to envelope everything. The faint crackling of dry twigs snapping beneath their feet sounded exceptionally loud and deafening in the quiet stillness. Without hesitation or delay, Donald reached out and gently grasped the man's arm, helping him carefully into a seated position. "You're safe for now, but I must get you out of here quickly. Can you walk if I help you?" The man nodded weakly, grimacing in pain as he attempted to stand up slowly and unsteadily. Donald supported him firmly, carefully guiding him toward the denser clusters of trees where the thick canopy above provided some much-needed cover and concealment. Each step they took was deliberate and cautious, as Donald stayed attuned to his injured companion's delicate condition, mindful of every minor movement. His mind raced with numerous questions: who exactly was hunting this man, and what secret was so critical that it put their lives in imminent danger. As they moved further into the depths of the woods, Donald's senses became sharper, more alert to any signs of threat or movement. The first pale light of dawn gradually seeped through the gaps in the branches, casting a faint bluish hue over their narrow winding path, yet doing little to dispel the persistent shadows of suspicion and unease that clung to the air around them. The injured man leaned heavily on Donald, every motion revealing his exhaustion and the sharp pain he was enduring. Suddenly, a faint rustle, a subtle sound just a little closer now caused Donald to freeze instantly. His instincts flared, and he immediately scanned the surrounding foliage, trying to identify the source of the noise. He caught a quick flicker of movement, a fleeting shadow slipping stealthily behind a tree trunk, heightening the sense of impending danger. His grip firmed and intensified around the injured man's trembling form. "Stay very close," Donald whispered softly but urgently. "We're definitely not alone out here, so stay alert." A new and unsettling realization dawned on him: whoever was pursuing this man was still lurking nearby, silently watching and patiently waiting for the right moment. The dense woods had transformed into a complex battleground filled with countless hidden secrets, and Donald suddenly found himself caught in a tangled web far more intricate and dangerous than he had initially imagined. The boundary between friend and enemy blurred dangerously as he struggled to keep both himself and his wounded companion alive amidst the growing threats. As they pressed forward through the wilderness, the first light of dawn painted the forest in shimmering shades of golden hue and deep crimson, yet beneath the towering trees, shadows lingered thick and unyielding, almost alive. The mystery surrounding their pursuers only deepened, and Donald realized nothing would ever be the same after this day's events. Donald crouched silently behind a fallen log, his breath creating icy clouds in the cold morning air as the wind whistled mournfully through the skeletal bare branches above. The flickering flames of the small fire cast uneven shifting shadows across his tense face, illuminating the snowdrifts piled high around them, and the battered figure lying helpless nearby, surrounded by the stillness of the snow-covered wilderness. The night closed in from all directions, silent, heavy, and filled with unseen dangers lurking in the shadows. The flickering, crackling fire was his sole safeguard against the overwhelming darkness, offering a fragile but necessary warmth amid the biting cold and uncertainty that surrounded him. He carefully examined the stranger's pale, gaunt face, noticing the faint, rapid breathing of his shallow chest. The injuries were quite serious deep gashes alongside evident bruises, but they were not immediately life-threatening. Still, leaving him here alone was completely unthinkable. Not tonight. Not when every faint sound could be a lurking predator waiting just beyond the shadows to strike. Donald's jaw tightened as doubt and suspicion gnawed relentlessly at his mind. Trust was an extremely rare and fragile thing in these woods, easily shattered by betrayal, desperation, or fear. Yet, despite everything, he found himself contemplating the risks of helping a wounded stranger who could potentially turn hostile at any moment and betray his own trust. A sudden gusty wind swept through the trees, causing their branches to groan loudly like ancient vigilant sentinels warning Donald to reconsider his course of action. He reached out with cautious hesitation, gently brushing snow away from the blood-stained face of the injured man, feeling carefully for any subtle signs of life. The steady rhythmic pattern of his shallow breaths reassured him he was still alive and fighting to survive. The strong scent of blood mixed disturbingly with the cold, crisp air, sharp and metallic in smell. Donald knew that he couldn't carry him much farther. The weight was too great, and the risks of exposure or detection were too high. However, abandoning the injured man now would be an act of cowardice, and cowardice was a privilege he simply could not afford in this moment. He inhaled deeply, forcing himself to focus and ground his resolve. With great caution, he moved closer, rummaging through his pack to find the necessary supplies: clean cloth, a small sharp knife, and a flask of water. His hands trembled slightly as he pressed the damp cloth firmly against the stranger's thigh, applying just enough pressure to slow the bleeding temporarily. The man stirred faintly, a soft groan escaping his lips, and Donald held his gaze steadily, whispering softly, "Stay with me. Don't give up now. I won't leave you." As Donald continued to work diligently, his mind raced through various potential reasons behind the stranger's unexpected arrival. What could have led him here? Was he escaping from dangerous enemies, or was there something even more sinister at play? These questions haunted Donald's thoughts, but he consciously pushed them aside, concentrating entirely on stopping the bleeding and ensuring the stranger remained conscious. Every single second became crucial. Slowly, the stranger's eyelids fluttered open, revealing bloodshot, glazed eyes filled with confusion and undeniable pain. Donald maintained a calm, steady voice, trying to reassure him. "You're safe now. We're going to get through this together." "My name is Donald. Could you please tell me exactly what transpired here?" The man nodded faintly in response, his lips trembling as he struggled to find words, but was simply too weak to speak clearly. Donald gently pressed a clean cloth against the deep wound once more, applying firm and steady pressure to slow the bleeding. The flickering glow of the fire cast dancing shadows across the scene, with sparks floating upward like fleeting hopes fading into the night sky. He observed the stranger's face closely, noticing the flicker of fear mixed with exhaustion in his eyes. "You're fortunate I happened to find you," Donald said softly, his voice conveying concern. "But I must get you out of this dangerous place. Do you think you can walk?" The man slowly shook his head from side to side, grimacing painfully as a wave of discomfort twisted his features in a grimace. Donald carefully observed him, analyzing every detail with keen attention. Forcing him to stand or move at this moment would only worsen his already serious injuries, but procrastinating was equally risky. The forest around them was unpredictable, filled with unseen threats. Every rustle or distant sound could signal imminent danger. He thoughtfully considered his options before making a firm decision. Gently supporting the man's trembling arm, Donald helped him into a seated position, leaning against a sturdy tree trunk for stability. "Hold on tight," Donald whispered reassuringly, carefully steadying him. The stranger's head sank forward and his eyes fluttered shut briefly as he struggled to summon enough strength to stay conscious. Donald remained vigilant, keeping his ears tuned to the eerie silence of the woods, his senses on high alert. While the trees around them stood motionless, an unsettling feeling of lurking danger lingered. He was certain that he was being watched. Swiftly, he rummaged through his pack once more, pulling out a damp cloth soaked in cool water to help soothe the injured man. Carefully, he gently wiped away the blood and dirt from the man's face, trying to soothe and comfort him in that vulnerable moment. The stranger exhaled softly, perhaps out of relief or from the pain he was enduring. Donald couldn't quite tell which. In that quiet, delicate moment, a faint thread of trust began to form, a small glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this man's hidden secrets wouldn't ultimately lead to his downfall. Donald instinctively reached into his pocket, grasping a well-worn medallion, a cherished talisman he always carried for reassurance and strength. As he pressed it gently into his palm, he felt the heavy weight of his responsibility grow even more intense and burdensome. This situation was no longer simply about mere survival. It had become a moral gamble, risking not only his safety, but also his conscience and integrity. Suddenly, a loud, sharp snap shattered the silence among the rustling leaves and trees, drawing immediate attention to the quiet surroundings. Donald froze in place, instincts instantly sharpening and heightening his senses. The woods remained eerily quiet, yet he knew all too well that one should never trust that peaceful stillness for too long. Every nerve in his body was on high alert, constantly searching for the source of potential danger lurking nearby. He cast a cautious glance back at the injured man, whose breathing had become noticeably steadier, though his eyes still flickered with a residual lingering sense of fear and unease. The man tightened his grip on his rifle, allowing instinct to override any remaining cautious hesitation. The surrounding forest was inherently unpredictable, filled with shifting shadows, mysterious sounds, and unseen eyes constantly watching from the darkness. Could he truly trust this stranger standing before him? Was it possible to risk exposing his own hidden secrets and vulnerabilities? These questions relentlessly hovered in the cold, crisp air, weighing heavily on his mind. Donald instinctively shifted into a more defensive, alert stance, instinctively shielding the injured man from the encroaching darkness around them. The fire's warm glow began to dim as the wind picked up, becoming sharper and colder with every passing moment. Their brief, fragile sense of safety was only a thin veneer over the chaos and danger that lurked silently beyond. The woods seemed to whisper in the darkness, and somewhere amidst the shadows, unseen eyes continued keenly observing their every move. No matter what secrets the mysterious stranger held, or what truths Donald still needed to discover, the night was far from over and still held many unknowns. A faint rustling nearby made his heart skip a beat, but he instinctively held his breath, tense and alert. The oppressive silence stretched on again, heavy and unyielding, filling the air with anticipation. Donald's mind raced rapidly, trust versus suspicion, safety versus imminent danger. Every instinct told him this moment was just the beginning of something much more dangerous. The real threat was lurking ahead, concealed within the darkness, waiting to emerge. Whatever secrets the stranger carried, they would soon come to light, and once those truths were uncovered, nothing would remain unchanged. Amidst the quiet, Donald tightened his grip on his weapon, knowing full well that the dangers were not only hidden in the shadows, but also lurking within himself: doubts, fears, and the seductive temptation to abandon his morals in pursuit of self-preservation. However, tonight, he knew he had no alternative but to persist, fueled by the faint glimmer of hope that this delicate and fragile alliance might eventually develop into something more meaningful than mere survival. As the wind roared anew and the shadows grew even darker and more oppressive, Donald silently made a solemn promise. He would do his best to protect the stranger, but only up until dawn. After that point, everything could potentially shift. Trust might be broken, enemies could emerge from hiding, or perhaps even he himself would change in unforeseen ways. For the moment, the night stretched endlessly before him as an uncertain, vast expanse, and he was resolute in facing it with cautious but unwavering determination. Donald's sharp eyes darted across the shadowy, dimly lit clearing, where the flickering flame of the dying fire cast wavering and distorted shapes on the snow-covered ground. The cold wind bit through the trees with relentless force, carrying a faint, almost unnoticeable murmur like a distant, haunting voice echoing from somewhere beyond sight. His breath formed fog in the frigid air, each exhalation slowly dissolving into the profound silence of the night, interrupted only sporadically by the soft rustling of the wind-swept branches. He crouched low, examining the disturbed snow where the wounded man had been just moments earlier. The earth was scuffed and smeared, as if hurried footsteps had disturbed the surface in a rush. Yet, the only recent sign of activity was a trail of uneven footprints leading away from the camp, small, anxious, and almost frenzied in their irregular pattern. Donald tightly clenched his fists, his muscles tense with anticipation as he narrowed his eyes in suspicion and concern. Where could he have gone? The fresh bloodstains on the snow stood out vividly against the white surface, while the footprints displayed inconsistent weight, suggesting someone had been dragged, perhaps injured, exhausted, or struggling to move. His instincts immediately heightened. This was no ordinary person slipping away unnoticed. Something or someone had taken him, an unknown entity, perhaps a dangerous attacker or creature. The unsettling thought sent a cold shiver running down Donald's spine, sharpening his focus and alertness. He steadied himself, pushed upright with determination, and his voice came out low, firm, and deliberate. "Hey, can you hear me? Where are you exactly?" Only the faint whispering of the wind responded in the silent night. Donald listened carefully, with his ears sharply tuned, trying to catch any sound beyond his own slow breath and the subtle rustling of leaves around him. The trail curved sharply toward a dense, tangled thicket of dark branches, which hung low ominously and looked especially menacing. Donald moved forward with extreme caution, each step deliberate and measured to avoid making any noise. His boots made soft crunches on the icy snow, yet the heavy silence pressing in from all sides made every movement feel exaggerated and amplified. He knelt down slowly, carefully tracing the footprints with gloved fingers, observing the uneven distribution of weight someone had been dragging themselves along, possibly injured, exhausted, or too weak to walk upright. A sudden gust of wind caused a branch above him to creak loudly and sway menacingly. Donald's eyes flicked upward for a brief moment, then quickly returned to examine the trail intently. His mind raced with questions. Why would a wounded person venture so far into the darkness and unknown danger? Was he fleeing from something imminent, or was he being intentionally chased by an unseen pursuer? He pushed himself forward with determined effort, each step feeling heavier and more burdensome than the last, while the silence around him was only occasionally broken by the faint crisp crackle of snow crunching beneath his boots. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a fleeting flicker of movement behind the thick, dense foliage. His entire body stiffened, his heart pounding rapidly, not out of fear, but from a heightened state of alertness and awareness. His hand moved instinctively close to his pocket, fingers curling around the cold, smooth metal of his flashlight. He shined the powerful beam into the shadows, piercing the darkness with an intense glow that revealed nothing but tangled, dense leaves and shifting shapes of shadows. Yet, an uneasy, persistent feeling of being watched refused to fade. The unnatural stillness in the air seemed almost oppressive, as if the surrounding forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. His pulse quickened even more, but he maintained a steady hand on the flashlight, carefully searching for any subtle clues around him. Suddenly, a faint rustling noise shattered the silence, sharp, unnatural, and clearly intentional. Donald instinctively crouched lower, muscles tense and coiled, ready for action. The sound drew nearer, like something heavy dragging itself over the snow in slow, deliberate movements, almost as if purposefully stalking him. His eyes flicked anxiously toward the source of the noise, but nothing visible appeared, only the tangled undergrowth, eerily silent now, as if holding its breath. He hesitated briefly, then cautiously took a small step forward, each movement deliberate and precise. His gaze swept across the ground, searching for any fresh signs, blood smears, disturbed snow, broken twigs. And there it was on a snapped branch, a faint smear of blood pressed lightly against the bark, as if someone had pressed their hand or face against it in a struggle. His stomach clenched tightly in an abrupt wave of unease. A sudden brief movement emerging from the shadows caught his sharp eye, a quick dark shape, too fleeting and swift to be clearly identifiable. His breath caught in his throat as his muscles tensed involuntarily. Was it a human being, an animal lurking nearby, or perhaps something entirely different and unknown? The fine hairs on the back of his neck prickled with a sudden sense of unease. He carefully steadied his breathing, making a conscious effort to listen more closely beyond the rapid pounding of his heart. The surrounding forest around him seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. Then, out of nowhere, a faint whisper, a soft, almost hissing sound drifted through the dense trees, carried subtly by the gentle breeze. Donald's eyes widened in surprise as he caught a fleeting glimpse of a flash of dark fur, momentarily illuminated by the beam of his flashlight. The mysterious shape disappeared behind a tall tree, leaving only a faint echo of its fleeting presence lingering in the air. For a moment, a flicker of doubt crept into his mind, making him question what he had just seen. Was this a figment of his imagination, or merely some of the forest's clever tricks designed to deceive? He shook his head firmly, trying to dismiss the rising wave of dread that threatened to overwhelm him. No, this was real and undeniable. Something had indeed taken the man, something moving with unwavering purpose, utter silence, and complete certainty in its actions. His jaw clenched tighter as the heavy burden of responsibility pressed down on him intensely. The trail wound further into the depths of the woods, where shadows grew denser and darkness seemed to swallow everything whole. He was fully aware that any hesitation at this point could prove to be fatal. The longer he stayed there, the greater the chance that whatever was lurking out in the shadows could slip away unnoticed or launch a sudden attack again. The wind intensified unexpectedly, swirling energetically around him, tugging at his coat and tousled hair with increased force. It carried an eerie, unsettling aroma, metallic and sharp, reminiscent of fresh blood, combined with the damp, earthy scent of the forest floor. His nostrils flared as he took a deep, sharp inhalation, his eyes meticulously scanning the uneven terrain before him. Every sound was heightened, the snapping of a dry twig, the distant haunting cry of a night bird, and the subtle, almost imperceptible shuffle of unseen movement. Suddenly, a distant cracking noise reverberated through the dense trees, breaking the silence. Donald's entire body tensed immediately in anticipation. He swiftly dropped to a crouch behind a fallen log, quietly lowering his flashlight, but keeping it at the ready, vigilant for any sign of danger. His ears strained intensely for any indication of what had caused the sound. Was it the injured man desperately trying to call for help, or something else entirely hiding in the darkness? Is there something more sinister hiding nearby? He carefully observed the surroundings with intense focus, holding his breath and keeping his muscles tense and ready. Several long minutes felt like an endless stretch of time, each second weighing heavily on him. Then, faintly, just barely audible, he detected a deep guttural growl, almost imperceptible and beneath his normal hearing range. His eyes widened even more in alarm and curiosity. The sound was raw, primal, unfamiliar in tone, yet unmistakably menacing. Slowly, he lowered his flashlight, steadiness in his hand, and listened more intently. The growl continued intermittently, then gradually faded into the quiet darkness of the night. Donald was faced with a critical decision: to follow the trail deeper into the unknown or to cautiously retreat and reassess the situation from a safer distance. His natural instincts pushed him to move forward, eager to uncover the truth, but a cautious voice within warned him to hold back and avoid unnecessary risk. Suddenly, a dark silhouette shifted unpredictably behind him. A large, ominously hunched, and thickly furry figure moved swiftly and silently. Donald instinctively spun around, his heart pounding loudly in his chest, muscles tense and alert. Only silence and darkness responded to his movement. No attack materialized, only the heavy, oppressive quiet of the night. His fingers gripped the flashlight more tightly, the beam now steady and unwavering as it pierced into the shadowy surroundings. From the corner of his eye, he caught another fleeting glimpse of massive, shadowy form darting quickly and hulking behind a nearby tree, disappearing almost instantly. Every nerve in his body was on high alert. Donald froze in place, senses heightened and acutely aware of every sound and movement. Was this the mysterious creature he sensed earlier? Or was it perhaps a dangerous predator lurking unseen within the darkness? He carefully took a slow step backward, then another, gradually retreating from this immediate threat, while keeping his eyes fixed intently on the shifting shadows around him. His pulse hammered loudly in his ears, echoing fiercely in the quiet as anxiety crept in. The chilling realization dawned who or what had wounded the man was still lurking somewhere nearby, silently watching, patiently waiting in the shadows, completely concealed in the thick gloom. A sudden gust of wind swept through the trees, carrying a faint metallic odor and unmistakable smell of blood mingled with damp, decaying earth. Donald's grip on his knife instinctively tightened, his muscles tense with alertness. The footprints had disappeared into the darkness, swallowed whole by the blackness of night. Whatever was out there had made a deliberate decision to hide, to observe silently, and to strike unexpectedly when the moment was right. The surrounding forest seemed to come alive with unseen watchful eyes, and shadows flickered eerily around him. The oppressive silence grew heavier, almost suffocating. Donald sensed the weight of an unseen presence pressing down on him, something ancient and primal, lurking just beyond his perception. His mind was racing rapidly, weighing his best options: to press forward into the suffocating darkness or to retreat and regroup elsewhere to plan his next move. He decided to remain in his position, despite the fact that every nerve in his body was on intense high alert. His senses became even more heightened, with ears strained to catch the faintest sound of movement and eyes meticulously scanning the dense surroundings for any small signs of life or activity. Although the trail might have been lost amidst the undergrowth, the threat itself was very much present and real. Whatever creature or person had taken the man was still lurking somewhere out there, hidden in the shadows and silently watching him. Suddenly, an unexpected shift in the wind carried a faint whisper, almost like a warning, that sent a shiver down his spine. Donald's skin prickled with a mixture of anticipation and fear, and he instinctively tightened his grip on his weapon, ready for whatever might come next. He understood that the forest was no longer just a quiet refuge or an area shrouded in mystery. It had transformed into a dangerous battleground inhabited by unseen and potentially hostile forces. The darkness concealed far more than he could comprehend, and now he was no longer able to distinguish clearly between who was the predator and who might be prey. He slowly retreated, each movement deliberate and cautious, remaining fully alert to every sound and shadow. Once again, the flickering shadows ahead revealed a massive furry silhouette moving just beyond his immediate line of sight, adding a new layer of menace to the tense atmosphere. Donald froze completely, every muscle tense and tightly coiled, while his thoughts raced uncontrollably. The unmistakable presence of the creature confirmed his worst suspicions. The danger was real, and it was actively hunting for prey. He proceeded with a careful, deliberate retreat, keeping a close watch with both his eyes and ears alert for any movement or sound. The wind carried a faint metallic odor reminiscent of blood, and the profound silence of the night was broken only by distant ominous noises that sounded like unsettling, abnormal sounds. His mind sharpened with clarity. He needed to locate the wounded man, or what remained of him, before the creature or any other lurking threat decided to attack again. As he moved slowly backward into the shadows, Donald realized that the situation had drastically changed. The forest was no longer just a place filled with ordinary dangers. It had transformed into a domain ruled by predatory silence, where unseen eyes silently observed each of his movements. He clenched his jaw tightly, resolute in his resolve to uncover the truth, even if it meant facing the encroaching darkness alone. With utmost caution, Donald moved through the dense and tangled underbrush, the cold air biting sharply at his cheeks as he pressed onward. The moonlight filtered gently through the thick branches above, casting a pale, ghostly glow over the uneven trail below, which was faintly marked by recent footprints heading toward the abandoned, dilapidated cabin nearby. Every careful step he took was purposeful, muffled softly by the fresh snow under his boots, which crunched quietly with each deliberate movement. The dense silence of the forest pressed heavily upon him, broken only by the faint whisper of the wind, weaving through the towering trees and the distant haunting call of a nocturnal bird. His breath formed fleeting clouds in the crisp, chilly air, and his fingers trembled slightly as he grasped his flashlight more firmly, seeking clarity in the darkness. The narrow beam flickered uncertainly, slicing through the shadows, fluttering with each gust of wind. Shadows danced around him, cast by the swaying branches overhead, and a prickling sensation crawled up his neck, and instinctual, warning that he was being watched. He slowed his pace, ears alert and straining for any unusual or suspicious sounds in the quiet night. The faint scent of damp wood combined with pine and the metallic tang of blood remnants from his earlier investigation intensified his heightened senses. The recent footprints, no older than an hour, indicated that whatever had been here was still nearby, possibly lurking in the darkness, watching his every move. Suddenly, a sharp snap echoed behind him, causing Donald to instantly freeze, his heart pounding louder than before with a mix of fear and adrenaline. He suddenly spun around sharply, abruptly turning to sweep his powerful flashlight across the dense, darkened trees surrounding him. The only things greeting his gaze were shifting shadows that danced and flickered in the faint moonlight. He exhaled slowly, attempting to steady his fraying nerves amidst the tense silence. His eyes then shifted back to the trail, which had now vanished into a tangle of tangled bushes and broken, jagged branches disturbed by recent frantic activity in the area. The wind suddenly picked up, whistling loudly through the ancient branches and creating an eerie, haunting chorus that echoed through the woods. Donald's gaze darted nervously across the expansive landscape, diligently searching for any signs of movement or life nearby. The silent forest seemed to hold its breath, the oppressive silence thick with anticipation and unspoken fears. He took a cautious, tentative step forward, then another, moving carefully to avoid disturbing the soft snow beneath his feet too much. The irregular, hurried footprints led directly toward the old abandoned cabin ahead, its dark silhouette looming like a forgotten relic from the past. Its windows were shattered into jagged shards, wooden boards hanging loosely from their frames, and the door sagged on rusted hinges, adding to the sense of decay and neglect. An eerie and oppressive stillness cloaked the entire structure, creating an unsettling atmosphere. As Donald cautiously approached, an unexpected gust of cold wind swept through the air, as if the very environment was pressing down on him with an invisible weight. He paused at the threshold, shining his flashlight into the dark interior. Darkness fully engulfed the space, but faint ghostly shapes and shadowy forms suggested years of neglect and total abandonment. The silence inside was dense and heavy, broken only by the soft noises of the wood settling and creaking under its own weight. He hesitated for a moment, then slowly pushed the heavy door open, which gave out a long creaking groan. Dust motes shimmered in the pale moonlight that seeped through cracks and gaps in the walls, creating a haunting glow. The floorboards beneath his feet emitted sudden creaks and groans as he entered, and his eyes quickly surveyed the entire space. A foul odor of decay mixed with a subtle metallic smell, possibly fresh blood, causing his pulse to race once again. Every instinct warned him to proceed with extreme caution, yet a compelling sense of urgency pushed him forward into the darkness. The trail had ultimately led him here for a clear purpose. He was certain he needed vital answers to the questions weighing heavily on his mind. Moving cautiously and deliberately, Donald's flashlight slowly traced the deteriorated walls covered with faded peeling wallpaper, remnants of old, abandoned furniture scattered around, a broken chair turned upside down, and a rusty lantern hanging silently from a hook that hadn't been touched or moved in many years. Dust particles hovered thickly in the stale air, giving the environment a sense of neglect, while the silence was suffocating, heavy with an oppressive stillness. Suddenly, faint noises echoed from the back room, a soft shuffling sound, almost inaudible to anyone else, but enough to make his skin crawl with unease. Donald froze instantly, listening intently to the stillness. The suspicious sound repeated, this time slightly closer, accompanied by a faint scraping of metal against wood. His grip on the knife tightened noticeably, fingers trembling yet holding a determined resolve. He pressed his back quietly against the wall, his heart pounding loudly in his ears. Carefully, he began to creep toward the doorway, the steady beam of his flashlight illuminating his path as he cautiously peered inside. Shadows flickered along the uneven textured walls, cast faintly by the soft shimmering moonlight filtering gently through the narrow gaps above. The room was chaotic and cluttered, an old rusty bed with torn sheets, a broken collapsing shelf barely holding together, and scattered debris strewn across the floor. In the far corner, a solitary figure hunched over silently, unmoving and tense. Donald's breath caught in his throat and his eyes narrowed sharply as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Was it a person, an animal? The shape was vague and indistinct, yet the palpable tension in his body told him to stay alert and ready for anything. His hand moved quickly and instinctively toward his weapon, but he hesitated briefly, wary of provoking a dangerous confrontation. Suddenly, the figure jerked abruptly, its head lifting very slowly, as if awakening from a trance. Its eyes reflected the faint, weak glow of the moon, unfocused, cautious, yet with an unsettling awareness of his presence that sent a shiver down his spine. Donald froze in place, muscles visibly tense, anxiously awaiting its next move. Before he had a chance to react, a faint rustling sound emerged from behind him, an almost imperceptible shuffling that immediately heightened his alertness. Shadows flickered intermittently at the edge of his peripheral vision, and a low guttural growl resonated from the darkness beyond the thin walls. His stomach clenched tightly with apprehension. Whatever was lurking outside was becoming increasingly restless, showing signs of aggression and growing more unpredictable. He took a slow, deliberate breath, attempting to steady his trembling nerves. His grip on the knife tight and firmly as he braced himself mentally for what might happen next. The shape before him shifted slightly, then gradually straightened, revealing a silhouette that became more defined and ambiguous figure, possibly a person or perhaps something more sinister. "Who's there?" he called out gently, his voice barely above a whisper, striving to mask the trembling in his tone and prevent giving away any hint of fear. The figure's head fully lifted, revealing a pair of eyes uncertain, cautious, yet strangely intense and eerily observant. Donald's pulse quickly accelerated, but he stubbornly maintained his composure and stance. The oppressive silence around them seemed to stretch out tensely, almost unbearable. Without warning, the figure moved slowly, deliberately raising a hand in a non-threatening gesture meant to reassure or communicate. Donald's gaze flicked briefly towards the doorway, sensing that something was deeply amiss in the atmosphere. Outside, the low guttural growl grew louder and more menacing, while shadows continued to shift and dance, as if an unseen presence was silently circling them. A faint cracking sound echoed from outside, perhaps a dry branch snapping or something heavier, more substantial. Donald's senses became acutely sharper. The persistent feeling of being watched intensified, creeping over him like a cold shiver. His mind raced rapidly. This was no ordinary threat. It was a pivotal convergence point, a mysterious nexus holding many hidden secrets and imminent danger. He gradually realized that the trail had guided him here, not merely by chance, but because this specific place concealed the answers he desperately needed to uncover. The mysterious figure, the strange sounds, the shifting shadows, they all pointed towards something deeply hidden, something that could potentially change everything he thought he knew. His grip on the knife slightly relaxed, yet his determination intensified as if a new resolve took hold. He knew he had to reveal the truth, regardless of the cost or the dangers involved. Steadying his breathing through the rising tension, he carefully took a cautious step forward, his eyes fixed intently on the figure standing before him. "Stay where you are," he commanded, their voice becoming more confident and firm, even though his heart pounded loudly within his chest. The figure hesitated briefly, then slowly moved closer, hands raised in a non-threatening gesture to show they meant no harm. Every muscle in Donald's body tensed up momentarily, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. Outside, the ominous growl resounded again, louder and more menacing this time, echoing through the dense trees and adding to the tense atmosphere. Donald's gaze shifted from the door to the figure and back again, filled with caution and anticipation. He sensed that the moment was rapidly approaching. Whatever was hiding just beyond the walls was about to make itself known in a startling and ominous way. The night had transformed into a veritable battleground filled with unseen lurking threats, and he found himself right in the middle of it. He instinctively tightened his grip on his weapon, prepared to confront whatever issue or creature might emerge from the oppressive shadows. The trail had led him to this critical point, and now the truth was finally within his reach, just a few steps away. The boundary between safety and danger had become increasingly blurred as the darkness pressed ever closer, as if waiting for him to make the next move. Donald's steady gaze was fixed on the faded yellowed map spread out before him on the battered, rough-hewn wooden table, its edges curling and stained with age and wear. The dim, flickering glow of a dying lantern cast unpredictable shifting shadows over torn yellowed papers, rusted tools, and a small battered notebook filled with hurried sketches and mysterious cryptic notes. The surrounding air was thick and heavy with the odor of damp wood, mold, and something metallic and acrid stale tang that seemed to cling to the walls and subtly whisper secrets he struggled to decipher. Tentatively, he reached out with trembling fingertips, tracing the lines on the map, recognizing familiar landmarks such as a winding creek, a fallen pine tree, and a sharp bend in the trail. But amidst the familiar terrain, strange symbols, mysterious markings, and cryptic annotations suddenly caught his eye. Crosses, circles, and odd runes hastily scratched in a hurried, almost frantic hand. His brow furrowed deeply as he carefully flipped through the pages of the old worn notebook, pausing to examine sketches of footprints, paw prints, and arrows pointing in multiple conflicting directions. Each new detail appeared increasingly suspicious and perplexing, yet no clear or logical explanation presented itself. A faint rustling sound emanating from the corner of the room suddenly snapped him back to the present moment. Donald immediately froze in place, narrowing his eyes cautiously. His instincts became more alert. He understood better than anyone that one should not jump to conclusions prematurely, but the hairs on his neck bristled with an unshakable premonition. Slowly and deliberately, he reached out for his trusty flashlight, its bright beam piercing through the darkness as he cautiously crept toward the source of the noise. The focused light illuminated a cluttered corner filled with dusty shelves stacked haphazardly with rusted cans, broken tools, and a cracked old lantern. Amid the jumble of debris, partially concealed beneath a torn rag, was a stack of yellowed fragile papers. Donald's pulse quickened as he recognized the edges ancient maps, weathered documents, and records written in hurried, uneven handwriting. He carefully brushed aside the rag, revealing a handful of the faded pages, the ink barely legible but still retaining their original meaning. As he carefully read through the notes, a chilling shiver ran steadily down his spine, amplifying his sense of dread. The documents detailed intentional manipulations, elaborate plans designed to mislead and disorient anyone attempting to follow their trail. The words written were stark and highly accusatory. They're watching us, guiding our steps, and pushing us towards the wrong destination. The truth is deeply buried beneath layers of complex deception. The moment of realization struck him with full force. Someone had been meticulously orchestrating this entire elaborate game, deliberately twisting the landscape and carefully laying false clues to serve their hidden nefarious agenda. His eyes darted anxiously around the room, desperately searching for the source or mastermind behind this deception. His gaze finally settled on a large folded map pinned prominently on the wall, densely covered in hurried scribbles, lines crossing out certain routes, rerouting pathways, and repeatedly rerunning over the same areas, indicating confusion and manipulation. His fingers instinctively traced the convoluted paths and routes drawn across the map, feeling the immense weight of the truth settling heavily onto his shoulders. This wasn't merely misdirection. It was a calculated, deliberate effort to control his every move and decision. Suddenly, his attention was caught by a subtle movement, a shadow, slipping stealthily behind a row of stacked boxes, adding an extra layer of mystery and tension to the scene. His hand clenched the flashlight more tightly, and he moved closer with careful precision, his voice low, calm, and unwavering. "Who's there? Show yourself now." An intense silence responded to him, heavy and suffocating in its quiet. Proceeding carefully, he approached the narrow beam of light illuminating a worn, battered cardboard box. Gently pushing it aside, he uncovered a chaotic collection of old, tangled wires, a broken, dusty radio, and underneath it, a damaged leather journal with scuffed edges and faded stitching. Donald paused for just a moment to gather his courage before flipping open the journal. The pages were filled with hurried notes, rough sketches of the surrounding forest, and odd cryptic symbols. One particular page caught his eye, a crude illustration of the cabin with a large X mark next to it. Next to the drawing, a hastily written note read, "The trap is set. They believe I am unaware of their actions." The handwriting was jagged, filled with desperation and frantic energy. He carefully examined the journal, understanding that whoever had penned these words had deliberately been observing him, guiding him along false trails and intentionally distorting his perceptions. The pieces of the puzzle started to fit together, the footprints leading nowhere, the signs of a struggle, and the hidden clues all meticulously chosen to mislead and confuse him. This realization grew even stronger. He was not merely chasing after scattered clues, but was actually being manipulated like a pawn in a much larger, more complex game. Suddenly, a loud creak reverberated throughout the room, making Donald spin around quickly, with the flashlight beam flickering across the darkened shadows. From the doorway, a figure slowly emerged, a shadowy silhouette cloaked in darkness, completely motionless, silently watching him. Donald's muscles tensed in anticipation. "I know you're there," he called out, steeling himself for what might come next. "Come out now." The figure hesitated for a brief moment, then slowly stepped forward into the dim light, raising their hands in a calm, non-threatening gesture to show they meant no harm. As it moved closer, Donald caught sight of piercing, cold, calculating eyes peering out from beneath a hood, giving an intense and intimidating aura. The face was partly hidden in shadows, yet he immediately recognized the sharp, defined features, the same defiance and silent challenge he had seen before in their previous encounters. "What do you want from me?" Donald demanded firmly, his voice remaining steady despite the rapid pounding of his heart inside his chest. The stranger's voice was rough and hoarse, tinged with a mocking and derisive tone that sent a shiver down Donald's spine. "You've been chasing shadows, Donald. Believing you're uncovering some hidden truth," the stranger said cryptically, "but in reality, the truth has been right here all along, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered. You simply failed to see the full picture." Donald clenched his fists tightly, a surge of anger igniting within him. "Why are you doing this? Who exactly are you?" A subtle, almost elusive smile appeared on the stranger's lips, hinting at secrets untold. "Let's just say I am part of the forest's long-standing secret, and you're meddling in something far beyond your understanding. Everything you've discovered, those false trails, the deliberately misleading signs, they are only the very beginning of something much larger." The words struck Donald sharply, like a powerful blow to his chest, but he held his stance unwavering. His mind was racing. If this mysterious figure was responsible for the deception, then the entire operation was far more complex and deeper than he had initially imagined, revealing layers of intrigue he had yet to fully grasp. Someone was secretly pulling the hidden strings behind the scenes, skillfully orchestrating the unfolding chaos. He took a cautious, deliberate step forward, his voice low, but filled with determination. "If you believe I'll turn back now, you're completely mistaken. I'm determined to uncover what's truly going on here, no matter what it takes or how much it costs me. The stranger's eyes flickered with an unreadable emotion, perhaps contempt, amusement, or maybe a mixture of both. Be very careful, Donald. The deeper you venture into the truth, the more you'll wish you hadn't. Because what awaits you isn't merely the truth itself. It's something far darker and more dangerous than you could imagine. Donald's jaw tightened firmly, clearly illustrating the growing tension he felt within. He sensed that he was standing at a crucial crossroads, facing a decision that could change everything. His hand subtly hovered near his belt, ready to draw his weapon at a moment's notice if the situation demanded it. The flickering, unreliable lantern cast shifting shadows and long, eerie silhouettes across the room, intensifying the atmosphere and heightening the sense of imminent danger. At that exact moment, he realized that nothing in this complex situation was as simple or straightforward as it initially appeared. The false trails and misleading clues were carefully planted, all pointing toward a single mastermind, someone who had an intimate knowledge of the forest's deepest secrets and who was relentlessly committed to concealing them at any cost. The intricate web of deception was far more elaborate than he had initially imagined, and now he found himself completely entangled within it. He met the stranger's gaze directly, eyes steady and determined. "Tell me everything you know," Donald demanded. "If I'm going to put an end to this, I need the full story, no matter how difficult or dangerous it might be." The figure hesitated briefly, then slowly nodded in acknowledgement. "All right, but once you uncover the truth, there's no way to go back or undo it," he warned. As the night wore on, Donald listened intently, each new word dragging him further into a complex labyrinth of deception and hidden motives. Shadows flickered and shifted across the walls, and just beneath the surface of his conscious awareness, one persistent thought took hold. He was no longer merely following footprints or obvious clues. He was actively hunting an invisible, elusive enemy, someone who knew the forest's deepest secrets intimately and was utterly determined to keep those secrets hidden at any cost. Donald's breath caught sharply as the first golden rays of dawn broke through the canopy, spilling warm light across the forest floor. Unexpectedly, the air was notably warmer, filled with the faint melodies of awakening songbirds fluttering through the branches. His eyes drifted over the horizon, where the familiar silhouettes of distant hills blurred into the promise of change and new beginnings. The heaviness of recent difficult days pressed heavily upon him, yet amid that burden, a sudden sharp clarity sharpened his mind. This moment would ultimately determine everything that followed. He cautiously stepped forward, each careful footfall muffled softly by the damp moss-covered earth beneath him, feeling a faint but steady wave of anticipation flow through his veins. The dense forest around him seemed to pulsate in time with his heartbeat, with leaves gently whispering in the breeze, as if subtly encouraging him to move forward. Shadows clung stubbornly to the edges of his peripheral vision, remnants of the darkness he had fought through earlier, yet now a brighter, more persistent light pressed against him, offering promises of renewal and the hope of resolution. In the distance, an open clearing illuminated by the warm morning glow stretched out before him, where the distant hills appeared to dissolve seamlessly into an endless horizon. It was precisely here, amidst this peaceful, expansive space, that he confronted the culmination of his arduous journey. His mind replayed the tangled web of threats, secrets, and lies woven intricately throughout these woods, each deliberate step, each critical choice leading him inexorably to this defining crossroads. With a steady hand, he reached into his coat pocket and grasped the small worn token he had kept close throughout his entire quest, feeling its familiar contours and textures beneath his fingertips. The decision before him hovered heavily in the air, weighty, yet strangely liberating at the same time. Part of him hesitated, longing to retreat back into the shadows, to hide from the truth, and protect the fragile peace he'd fought tirelessly to preserve. But another voice within, calmer yet persistent, urged him to face whatever lay beneath the surface and confront the inevitable truth. The strong desire to turn away, to completely deny and ignore the heavy burden pressing on him, was almost overwhelming, but he understood deep inside that remaining silent would only serve to deepen and prolong the wounds. He carefully moved toward the edge of the small clearing, where a solitary ancient tree stood tall, its twisted, gnarled branches stretching skyward like a silent witness, silently bearing witness to his struggles and secrets. The gentle warmth of the morning sun caressed his face as he took a moment to observe the expansive landscape once again, seeing it all with a renewed clear perspective. This place felt like a crucial threshold, a symbolic boundary between the past he wished to forget and the future that awaited him, full of possibilities. The decision was now crystal clear: either stay and bravely face the consequences, no matter how difficult, or leave behind the secrets that haunted him and venture boldly into the unknown. His fingers clenched around a small token, a meaningful symbol of everything he had endured and everything he was determined to protect. His heartbeat was calm and steady, flowing not from fear, but from a deep sense of resolve. The doubts and hesitation that had haunted him just moments earlier gradually began to fade, replaced by a quiet, unwavering certainty. This was definitely his moment of truth, the point of no return. With deliberate intent, he took a measured step forward, feeling the firm earth solidly beneath his feet, anchoring him to the present in his decision. The forest symphony seemed to fall silent, as if collectively holding its breath in anticipation of his crucial decision. Every inhalation carried the rich scent of pine needles and fresh morning dew, serving as enduring reminders that life persisted beyond the darkness and shadows. The distant horizon beckoned irresistibly, promising potential change but also demanding unwavering courage. A gentle breeze stirred the air, softly ruffling the leaves and carrying away lingering doubts and uncertainties. The woods surrounding him exhaled deeply, releasing their ancient secrets and whispers into the crisp morning air. The path ahead was uncertain and shrouded in both possibility and peril, yet Donald felt a renewed sense of purpose, gradually settling deep within him. The journey was far from over, but hesitation and doubt no longer held him back. A faint smile gently touched his lips as he slowly began to walk forward, each step affirming the strength of his choice. The forest stretched endlessly before him, vast, uncharted, full of mystery, and alive with the promising potential of new beginnings. Whatever challenges or surprises awaited him on this path, he was ready to face them head on, propelled by the quiet, resilient strength that had quietly grown during these days filled with shadows, light, and hope. The future stretched out before him, full of endless possibilities, and at last he was truly ready to face it headlong with confidence. As he stepped into the warm sunlight filtering through the trees, a soft breeze gently caressed his face, rustling the leaves and quietly sweeping away the lingering doubts that once clouded his mind. The woods exhaled once more, their ancient secrets subtly blending into the crisp morning air, adding a mysterious sense of calm. The trail ahead remained veiled in uncertainty and ambiguity, yet Donald's determination and conviction were unwavering and strong. He had discovered that genuine courage was something born deep within himself, and that confronting uncomfortable truths, no matter how difficult or unsettling, was the only genuine way to progress. He paused briefly to gather his thoughts, then shifted his gaze toward the distant rolling hills, feeling the emotional burdens of the past gradually lifting from his shoulders. The profound encounter with his own fears and doubts had transformed him. Now he carried a heightened understanding and clarity. The secrets he once feared and tried to hide no longer exerted any control over him. Instead, they served as the essential foundation for his new resolve to choose a different, more purposeful path. With a steady, determined breath, Donald pressed forward along the trail, the small token clutched firmly in his hand, serving as a tangible symbol and reminder of his remarkable journey and the inner strength he had gained. The forest's gentle, soothing hum surrounded him, serving as a quiet affirmation that he was steadily heading toward a future carefully crafted by his own choices, inner courage, and acceptance of what lay ahead. The shifting shadows gradually retreated behind him, replaced by the warm promise of dawn and the countless new opportunities it heralded. His steps became more steady and assured, each one resonating with his growing sense of clarity and purpose. The trees and bushes around him seemed to softly whisper words of encouragement, urging him to fully embrace the path ahead, no matter how uncertain it might seem. The horizon expanded endlessly before him, beckoning him into the unknown, an invitation he welcomed wholeheartedly and without hesitation. The past was now firmly behind, left to fade into memory. The future eagerly awaited his arrival, and Donald was completely prepared to meet it head on. No longer haunted by shadows or doubts, he moved forward, guided by the unwavering light of his own firm resolve and inner strength.